Good evening. Welcome to the regular Town Council meeting for Monday, June 17th here in Council Chambers. Our first item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Bridges, would you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Town Clerk?
Councilor Drake?
Here.
Councilor Hurley is out of town on business. Councilor Kotkin?
Here.
Councilman Usos?
Here.
Councilor McAllister?
Here.
Councilor Montanari is unable to attend. Councilor Roberts? Here. Deputy Mayor Consol?
Present.
And Chairperson Hemmon.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is a presentation on the townwide radio system replacement plan. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. At this time, I'd like Assistant Town Manager Rand Palmer to introduce the item.
Good evening. We're here tonight to hear about a plan that staff has worked on for a little bit more than a year to look at the existing radio system and to look at potential replacement radio systems. In about 2002, 2003, the town purchased a what's known as an 800 megahertz radio system. It's essentially a public safety radio system for use by fire and police, and in this case, it's a town-wide system, so all staff that need to have radio communications, including physical services and Parks and Rec, have a system. The town bought that system right at the bubble of a technology change. I think the town manager used an analogy today that I'd like to borrow. It's like buying a brand new horse when Ford was developing the Model T. The technology has changed dramatically since we bought that system, or the town bought that system. The system that we own is a analog system. There were digital systems available at the time. They were not advisable because they did not work well for firefighters. They did not work well in a situation where there was a lot of background noise and could have posed a safety hazard. So this system, as I think you all know, has been plagued with problems. It's got coverage issues, it's got some installation issues, it's got service maintenance issues. But I'd say staff, Tom Hempel from IT, the now retired Lieutenant Scales, John Eichner, our new communications consultant, who is off making copies of the proposal. And recently, Sergeant Mike Conley from the police department and Deputy Chief Schroll have all worked tirelessly to work together to keep the radio system running. And about a little more than a year ago, our current vendor came to us and said, you really need to replace some equipment. Your microwaves in particular are no longer covered. They're no longer under warranty. We're not even going to guarantee service on them. And they presented us a proposal that could have run up to about $600,000. So being aware that we were working off of old technology and being concerned that we had a system with issues, my feeling was, okay, if we're going to invest that kind of money, let's get to the core of the system and look at what needs to be replaced. So I asked them to give me a price on replacing the controllers. And I am probably the least technical staff person on this assignment, but that's essentially the brains of the radio system. They're on the towers, and they basically control all the communication back and forth between the radios and dispatch and the towers. And the answer to that question was, oh, you can't replace those. They're no longer manufactured. So my next question was, well, then what's the solution? Well, you go with them until they die, and then you have to basically replace the whole thing. So at that point, we all collectively felt it didn't make a lot of sense to invest a lot more money in a system we were having trouble with. So we started a process to do a qualifications-based search for a replacement radio system. And there are lots of radio system vendors, but there are few that do true what's called P25 or Project 25 public safety radio systems. So we went to the other two vendors that we know have a proven reputation for installing systems that work. One was City Communications, who are relatively new in this market, and we did, they were our initial contact. We spent a lot of time talking to them, and we also approached Harris shortly thereafter and asked them to, what would they propose to us to solve our coverage issues. They came in with a fully engineered proposal that includes 3 sites as opposed to the 2 we now have, and it does not require, and let me repeat that, it does not require the building of a new tower. We are talking to the leasing company that leases a space on top of Executive Square, and we have a soon-to-be vacated shed that we can locate in, and we essentially have been told that we're in line to get that once Nextel vacates it. So once we got this fully engineered proposal, we started to negotiate price, and we did negotiate price with both vendors. And we came back with a Harris proposal that was more complete, was more comprehensive, a better solution for significantly less money than the Cassidian proposal. Its cost from start to finish is $3.5 million. So, that's a big number, and we know that. We're proposing to do a 10-year lease purchase on the item. We don't anticipate, and we're still working the final numbers, but we don't anticipate a lot of budgetary impact, at least for the first 3 to 4 years. We've got some reserve in place to help offset it, and we're working on just our overall picture. The manager is actually preparing that, and we'll have that later in the week. So without talking too much more, I think what I'd like to do is ask Anne-Marie Stanford, who is the longstanding Harris representative in Connecticut, and Scott Cheddar from Eastern Communications, and they would do the install. Harris would sell the system to us, and Eastern would do the install. And I just want to tell you that these are the folks that were involved in getting the Port Authority back on the air after the Trade Center collapsed. So these are people that have a wide range of experience in installing and maintaining systems. So, and certainly we have a whole list of references to check. So Anne-Marie has a PowerPoint. John is copying it right now as we speak, so we'll have copies. So Paul, if you could drop the screen. Oh, excuse me, and without further ado, Anne-Marie.
Sure, Anne-Marie.
Rayanne, if I may, before you, I'm sorry, Anne-Marie, maybe after the presentation, I know when we had our infrastructure meeting, the person, Keith from Trot,
Yes.
gave us a very detailed, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions because of the cost of this system, but Keith was very detailed and a plethora of information on why the present system we have is in the disarray that it is. And I know there was notes taken, so maybe we could expand on that at the end of the meeting.
Actually, or I could do it right now while we're getting...
If you wouldn't mind, because I
yeah.
think that would lead up to what's happening here now, and I think that's very
think so.
important for the town, the people in town to understand.
As I said, we purchased a system at the kind of the bubble when the technology was changing. And we believe that the system was bid, it was a bid situation to meet the lowest price. And so when they designed the system, they designed a bunch of shortcuts into it. And we've found those shortcuts over time. Initially we had, when I first started working for the town in 2004, there was a huge interference problem. We found out later on that wire going up to the tower was the incorrect wire, should not have been used outside. We have issues with the monitoring system not being a full system. So we think, and we don't know, I mean, I think that the people in town that worked on this in good faith thought that they were buying a good system. There are hundreds or thousands of SmartNet 2 systems out there that work well. Ours does not work well. And maybe Motorola thought that they were putting together a good system. We don't know. I wasn't there, but essentially what we have is a system that was built with shortcuts and then not maintained well. We have a large list of maintenance issues that we've had with the service shop. So I think that's part of why we felt we'd go to the other vendors at this point.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
Sorry. Can you remind me again what year we purchased the system and how much we purchased it for that we have today?
Mike?
2002, 2.3 million.
2002, 2.3 million.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, but it's on now. Thank you.
Dim.
Thank you, Rayanne. Can everybody hear me? Okay. My name is Anne Marie Stanford, as Rayanne said, and I'm the area sales manager for Harris Corporation. I've been doing it for many years in Connecticut and in New York City, and thank you for having us. And we're talking tonight about the P25 Phase 2 radio system. P25, by the way, is a standard that has been set by the Association of Public Service Communications Officers. So it's a set of standards that's been around now for a couple of years, and all public safety systems should be built to this standard. So the current situation, much of which Rayanne talked about, is that the existing system is a two-site system on towers at Fire Station 3 and a leased location at the Callahan site off the Berlin Turnpike. The two locations do not adequately cover the town of Wethersfield. The current system has also been discontinued by the manufacturer, so that's another problem. They can't maintain it going forward. Adding a third site will correct the coverage problem, but they could not do that with the current system, as the system is no longer being manufactured. System maintenance is also becoming very expensive, and more failures are being experienced that affect public safety personnel and citizen safety. The current system is proprietary. It is not built to P25 standards and does not take advantage of that. Therefore, it doesn't facilitate interoperability between agencies and the neighboring jurisdictions. The current system also has very limited capacity. There are 4 talk paths to support all of the town's users. So the probability of calls not getting through is fairly high, especially if there are channels that are out of service due to faults in the system. So the solution from Harris is a 3-site P25 800 megahertz trunked radio system, Phase 2, which is the very latest standard from APCO. It will protect the town's investment. The technology upgrades are typically software-based rather than hardware-based because this is an IP-based system. And the trunk technology that you were very lucky enough to have, I will say this, that the town had the foresight years ago when 800 megahertz channels became available to apply for the 800 megahertz channels and put in a trunked radio system. It is absolutely the standard that every town, if they could afford it, would attain to have. The trunk technology provides interoperability between all of your town departments when needed, and that becomes really critical during storms. And we've had our share of storms over the last couple of years, so I'm sure it's been put to use. The trunk technology also ensures that conversations cannot be stepped on, so emergency communications are always a priority. While everybody can share the system, if there is an emergency declared by a police officer, a firefighter, that will automatically be given priority in the system if it was ever busy. Adding a third site in this redesign will give you a coverage guarantee from Harris in writing of 97% mobile and 96% portable throughout the entire town of Wethersfield. It will protect the safety of our police officers and firefighters, which they don't unfortunately have today with the current system. And by the way, 97% and 96% is a little bit over the public safety standard of 95%. And in many of the areas, we actually feel that it's 100% with the third site. So it's going to be a very major difference in how the system plays and where and when a firefighter, police officer, or public works can communicate back to dispatch. We've added redundancy to the system to improve reliability. So the main pieces of the infrastructure are duplicated so that if there ever was a failure, it would automatically go to the redundant part of the system. You will have direct interoperability with Hartford when needed. We are able to put Hartford's technology in the new radios from Harris. Even though it is a proprietary system, it's proprietary to Harris. So you will have direct operation with the city of Hartford as you want it or as needed. The capacity to add the surrounding communities to the Weathersfield system. Share the infrastructure and the maintenance costs while maintaining your autonomy. We sold a P25 system to the town of Waterford a few years ago. We have now added the city of New London to that system. So the city of New London will continue to operate just as they always have, independently, but they are sharing the infrastructure that we put in for Waterford and sharing the cost of maintenance as well. So it's kind of a win-win for the various communities in the area that could never afford a system on their own. There will be the capability, because of the extra capacity, to join the Weathersfield system. So just to summarize, and I think we've talked a little bit about this already, it is a phase 2 simulcast system. There are 6 channels, 10 talk paths versus 4 on the current system. The high availability switching infrastructure, which I think Rayanne referred to as the brains of the system, there are actually 2 geographically separated, so that if something should happen to one in one building, the second one automatically takes over. They are the third simulcast site, besides Kelleher and Callahan, is going to be the Executive Square building. So it is new, redesigned, fully redundant, all IP-based backbone network. There will be new fiber, leased fiber between all of the sites, and a brand new microwave system as well. The microwave system will be backing up the fiber system, so there'll be redundancy in the backhaul as well, which unfortunately you don't have today. New dispatch consoles at the police department and logging recorders, guaranteed 97% system portable performance, and all new radios and portables for the town departments. That's mobiles, portables, public works, police, fire. Everyone will get a brand new radio. The new portable radios, oh, I think I said that already, I'm sorry. Oh, for the fire department, right now they're using 2 radios. They will only need 1 with the new system. So that too will cut down on costs and ongoing maintenance costs, as well as making it operationally a little bit easier for the firefighters to only have to have 1 radio. We have included a proprietary system to Harris called Beon, and this is something really new in the industry, and it allows someone with a smartphone, which most people have today, to put on a Harris application that would allow users to communicate back to the system anywhere they are in the world, actually, if they have cellular service. This also could be used for surrounding communities. One of my customers in New York and New Jersey is putting in one of these systems, and they're going to rent time on it to surrounding users. So it's an adjunct to the trunked radio system. As we get further on in the presentation, we'll talk a little bit more about who would use this type of application, but it is something that we are actually adding to the system at no cost to the town of Weathersfield. This is a system block diagram. It looks like an eye chart from here, I'm sure, but we do have copies of the presentation of anybody who wants it. But that basically is showing you the transmit sites as well as the switching centers and the various pieces of equipment that will be installed in different locations throughout the town of Weathersfield. This is the coverage map, and as you can see, the white area within the town boundaries is perfectly clear, which is why we feel that your coverage will probably be 100%, but typically guarantee 97%. What that means is that you could be standing right where I am with a portable radio, and it might not communicate, but if I move 2 inches, it will. So we really feel that the coverage is going to be vastly improved with this third site. And it will deliver DAQ 3.4, which is basically an industry standard, which means when they push to talk, it will be understood without having to repeat, without having a lot of static.
coverage. This is the indoor coverage.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I had it in there. Thanks, Scott. This is the picture of the indoor coverage with a portable, and you can see there are a couple of little spots where you'll see blue within the town boundaries. That does not mean there's no coverage there. It just means that it's less than 97%. It could very well be 96.5%, but it's just not the full 97%, but I think it's probably more than adequate for the town's needs. Bypass mode. This is a little bit technical, but it is also proprietary to Harris. We are the only trunked radio system, P25, that has this simulcast bypass mode. And basically what it means is, right now in most simulcast systems, if a channel goes out, you can take the whole system out. In our system, if one channel is out, the system automatically removes that channel from all of the transmitters in the system, so that you never stop trunking, you never lose the full benefit of the system. When that channel comes back on the air, it automatically puts it back into all of the sites without any operational interference. Nobody has to do anything, it's just all automatic. And that is something that is proprietary to Harris. No one else does that. This is just a picture of what the microwave antenna and equipment is going to look like. This is the new microwave system that will connect all of the sites in town, the police department, the EOC, etc. New dispatch consoles will be installed at the police department, and there is another console at Fire Station 2, I believe. So console replacements will be one for one what you have right now. And the EOC, we are going to put in a small UPS that will power 2 control stations and all of the fiber connectivity, just for a little added redundancy. A new logging recorder is being supplied, and this is a trunked logging recorder from Exacom. They're made up in New Hampshire, and telephone as well as radio will be logged. The conversations that are recorded will be detrunked. I don't know if you do that today with the system that you have, but basically what it means is trunked conversations jump from channel to channel. In the old days, you had to go back and piece those conversations together. With the new logging recorders, that's done automatically, so that if you go back to listen to a conversation, the whole conversation comes out at once and you don't have to piece it all together. This is an interoperability gateway, and it's going to provide 2 major functions. One is going to bridge the existing analog system while we transition to the new P25 system, so that there's no loss of communications during the transition to the new system. And it also provides analog interfaces for telephones, other base stations, for interoperability. So that is a major part of the system as well. The system acceptance plan, once the system is installed, we stage it at the factory for all of the functionality and performance. That acceptance plan is quite healthy. We go over every single piece of equipment. We go over every single function that the system has to provide. We then bring it out into the field to install it, and we will again be testing it for functionality and performance as well as for coverage. All of the facilities, the backbone, the consoles, the control stations, every hardware and software component will be fully tested and accepted by the town. You have to sign off on all of this before you pay a penny to Harris.
Oops, sorry.
So I'm going to turn it over to Scott, who's going to talk a little bit about the mobiles and the portable radios. Trade places.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Sorry for the 10 button pushes there. So I'm Scott Shetter. I'm with Eastern Communications. We're the Harris Regional Center of Excellence for the Northeast. What that means is there's about 45 Harris integrators from Washington, D.C. up to Maine. And at Eastern, we provide all the engineering support services and all the product distribution for that 12-state region plus the District of Columbia. We're headquartered in Long Island City in Queens, New York. So the radios that we're providing as part of this project, this is one of the radios that's called an XG25. This is a portable radio, which is, it's a radio you hold in your hand. These radios are capable of the P25 protocol that Anne-Marie talked about with the system, which is phase 2. And it also includes phase 1 for backward compatibility with other systems that would be a phase. For instance, the Connecticut State Police are putting in slightly older technology, P25 phase 1, and these radios will be backwards compatible with that as well. The next radio is the XG75. This radio is geared for the public safety users, police and fire. One of the key differences between the XG25 and the XG75, this radio has two microphones. There's a microphone in the front and there's a microphone in the rear. And if anybody has the new iPhone, it's the same concept. By having the two microphones, we're able to do active noise cancellation. So particularly if you're a police officer or a first responder or fire personnel and you're in a high noise environment, the back microphone picks up largely the ambient noise, the front microphone picks up largely the voice, and the chipset in the radio is able to use that algorithm to cancel out the noise. And again, it's capable of all the same operating modes. And EDAX is listed there. EDAX is the technology, it's proprietary trunk technology, and that's what Anne Marie alluded to that City of Hartford's using. So these radios are getting EDAX in them to be compatible with Hartford if that need is ever there. And then, of course, the P25 phase 1 and phase 2. And then also, each of these radios is going to come with what we're calling single key DES. DES is a data encryption standard. It's a federal guideline for encryption. And this is a single key DES allows encryption capabilities on these radios, particularly for police, tactical units, or SWAT teams that need to have encryption mode. These radios will be supporting that. The next radio
Sorry,
is...
did I skip one?
Yep.
Doesn't want to go back. And there we go.
Okay, this is this radio, the Unity XG100. This radio is fundamentally a different radio than the other is. This radio is what we call a multi-band radio. And what that means is, the radios that are used by the town today, and the first two radios we talked about, they're what we call single-band radios. Those radios work in the 700 to 800 megahertz range. This radio works in the VHF range, which would be important for, say, like the Coast Guard or FEMA. It also works in the UHF range, which is used by some of the surrounding towns. It works in the 700 and 800 megahertz range also. So if there was some type of event that was a multi-agency response that included maybe some federal agencies and maybe even National Guard with flooding or something, all of these different entities are typically in different frequency bands. This radio is not for every officer or first responder, but it's typically for the command structure. So for the commanders on scene are able to have interoperability and talk with their counterparts with these other agencies that are operating in different bands. These radios also include, every radio's got GPS in it. In fact, this picture you see on the front with those circles on it, there's actually a map. So when you go to the GPS screen, it'll show you where you are, and if there's other people in your unit using the same radio, anytime they push the button to talk, you'll actually see on the map where the other users are. A lot of applications, one application is like search and rescue. Let's say there's a lost child or a senior, and there's multiple people at night looking for this lost individual. It's easy to be able to see where every person within your unit are with respect to yourself. This is actually an adaptation of some military technology that Harris developed. One thing Anne Marie didn't mention is Harris is almost every Humvee and every vehicle in the Marine Corps and the Army worldwide has a Harris communications package in it. That's really Harris's legacy. That technology is what's gone into this radio. Next slide. There's two different mobile radios. The mobile radio is a radio that would go in a vehicle, like a police car or a fire truck. And these radios are very similar to the portables in terms of their capabilities, the frequencies they support, the P25, the compatibility with EDAX for other entities that are using that, as well as the capability for the M7300 to support the encryption standard. And then this radio, the Unity XG100, this is the mobile version of that multi-band portable. So same idea, multiple agencies on different frequency bands. This radio will support all of them. And this radio is used a lot. In some cases, this radio is used by, if you ever see like a state trooper or someone pull up, they'll have like 5 antennas on their trunk because they've got different radios in their trunk for all the different entities they speak with. This radio will support all those different frequencies in one radio.
Want to talk about Beyond?
Sure. Beyond, this is the application that Anne-Marie mentioned, is the application that really connects a cellular phone and on a smartphone. In fact, I have the application on my phone. I've got a phone here. It's just an app that you run, and it's connected to your radio system. As far as the commercial cellular carrier is concerned, it's just a data call. On the radio side, it's voice coming in from the carrier over the IP network. So typical applications would be, let's say a town manager or someone that's part of the command staff. Maybe they live outside the town boundary. Maybe they live or they're traveling for work at a conference or something where they're outside the radio coverage of the system. As long as they have their phone with them and they're within coverage of the cellular system, they can actually listen to talk groups and then talk on the radio system.
And it is secure.
Oh, it is secure. It's end-to-end encryption. It uses AES encryption, which is the latest encryption standard, advanced encryption standard from the federal government. It's 256-bit encryption, and it's end-to-end encryption. There's a lot of different applications for Beyond. Beyond has a mapping component, so it actually will show you on a map. It's integrated today with Google Maps. I don't know if any of you use that for traffic. I use Google Maps for traffic all the time. It's integrated with Google Maps. You can also use it to track assets. This is a platform that is under a lot of development right now. There's a whole team of developers that are adding new capabilities to Beyond. And as far as that roadmap, in the very near future, Beyond's also going to be able to support streaming video. Let's say you're a firefighter or you're a first responder and you're the first on scene. You can actually take video and have group communications with that video and send that to the rest of the responders that are on their way. There's a lot of really interesting applications, what we call situational information, where this information can be shared in the group through the Beyond application. So, think Beyond when, some users, it's just not convenient to be carrying a bulky, ruggedized portable radio. This is a radio that can fit in your suit pocket. Does offer capabilities that are not typically available in a land mobile radio system. And it also allows users to be able to communicate and manage their resources, from a laptop. There is an administrative application that you use to manage the users in this system and to grant rights and those things.
And I think that's about it.
That's it. Let me pass it back to Anne-Marie.
Be more than happy to take any questions and clarify anything that we maybe missed.
I also want to add something that I left out before we start with questions, in that when we set about to do this, we took a look to see if the state had any state contracts for radio systems, and in fact they do with Harris. So we would be purchasing from the state system with a significant discount on top of that.
Do counselors have questions?
So what's the lifespan or the useful life of this system, considering that we've had issues with the current one?
I would estimate 15 to 20 years. Oh, sorry, I thought I had this in. I would estimate 15 to 20 years. I can tell you that the system we put in the city of Hartford back in 1991 is still perking along without ever having one failure, I'm proud to say.
All right, well, that's good. So how are the upgrades handled? Is there any software upgrades that are included in the system, or how,
Software and many of the components of the infrastructure hardware, that's part of the contract. These software upgrades, it can be a 1-year contract, it can be a 5-year contract. It is part of the initial contract for a couple of years that software and hardware upgrades would be included.
in the first 2 years? So then subsequent to that?
We just renew the contract for whatever you want to maintain. Most people do the software maintenance that makes sure that the system is always up to date with the latest revisions of software, so that if you add something later down the road, you can make sure that everything is compatible.
Okay, I don't mean to, I have a few questions, but I don't mean to monopolize it, but on the second page of your slide, when you talked about sharing the infrastructure with another city, with New London piggybacked on Waterford's, so what was the cost to the city of New London, do you know?
All they had to do was purchase the mobiles and the portables radios. The infrastructure from Waterford actually did cover all of the city of New London. So they just purchased mobiles and portables, and frankly, they purchased it from our dealer in Guilford, who takes care of that system. So I'm going to guess, I think I heard that it was about $1 million for everything.
So they paid the city, so this would be, I take it, maybe, Jeff, this would be negotiated between the cities?
Yeah, they're also paying part of the yearly maintenance on the system. And that was an agreement that was reached between Waterford and New London. They would be more than happy to take telephone calls about how they did this and share the contract that they put together between the two communities, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. So there is a potential additional revenue stream for us, or a reduction in costs?
Very much so, could be.
The Beyond system, it's proprietary, so what's that cost? What would that cost us?
There's a $300 charge for the application for the smartphone, and that's just paid once. You never pay that again. We are providing the server, actually, at no charge to the town. That is going to be connected to the radio system.
So the only additional cost would be the cost of cell phones?
It's a data
That
call, so whatever the town pays for a data call. Anytime someone makes a call on the Beyond system, it's actually treated by the cellular companies as a data call. And our system is the only one also that supports all of the AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, Nextel, all of them. They're all supported by this application.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Deputy Mayor?
If I may, Anne Marie, thank you. I know at the infrastructure meeting, maybe you can just give a little history to the townspeople about where you went from GE to Ericsson to Harris, because a lot of people don't know Harris. I mean, I know Harris Communications, but, and the other gentleman touched on the fact about the U.S. government and the military service and all, so I think to put people's mind at ease, we'll know what we're buying this time, and we'll feel a little more comfortable, and maybe you could explain a little bit of that to the public?
Sure. We started out as part of General Electric many years ago, mobile radio department. I was there, and I've been through the iterations. Ericsson of Sweden, back in 1990, wanted to have name recognition in the United States for cell phones, actually. So they entered into a joint venture with GE Mobile Radio. After a couple of years, we became totally owned by Ericsson of Sweden. And about 2.5 years ago, our division was purchased by Harris Corporation. Harris Corporation is one of the largest companies that manufactures two-way radio in Rochester, New York, by the way, is where their manufacturing facility is. They are the largest defense contractor supplying communications equipment to the defense industry. And they've been that defense contractor for many, many years. They are one of I think they're the leading, actually, defense contractor for communication systems. So they decided, though, that they would like to expand their business and get into the local government market, which is police, fire, and towns and cities and statewide systems. And so they purchased us about 2.5 years ago. We have 16,000 engineers. Lots of engineering going on all the time, and a lot of the new technology that we're able to offer is being imported from what they've developed for the military.
And then just one follow-up. If you'd also just expand a little bit on if there were a problem with the system. I know you mentioned response time in order for us to stay online. If you could just expand on that a little bit.
And that would definitely be part of your contract.
Right.
We have 2 Harris technicians that are full-time in Connecticut, and they do take care of Worcester as well, Worcester, Massachusetts. And then that is going to be also backed up by Eastern Communications. They're going to have a technician working out of the office in Meriden, the Harris office.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Anne Marie.
Other counselors have questions? Counselor Roberts?
What other towns do you have besides New London and Waterford?
Hartford, which
Okay.
is the next town to you.
Okay.
We have, I've been working in New York. We take care of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. That is one of our larger accounts.
What other ones, I guess, do you have in Connecticut is what I'm interested in?
I have to think about that for a few minutes. I think Hartford, Waterford, New London, those are the 3 trunked radio systems that we have in Connecticut.
And what else the majority of the other towns use, do you know?
They have a mixture now. Some have Motorola, some have Kenwood, but any of the trunked radio systems are typically going to be either Harris or Motorola.
Thank you.
Counselor Montanari?
Thanks, Mayor. I have a couple, I want to follow up that question. This issue about interoperability with Hartford, maybe this is a goofy question, but why aren't we piggybacking on them with just Hartford and just doing what New London did with Waterford?
Hartford system wasn't really designed to cover Weathersfield, and they are using a proprietary technology from us, EDAX, which they chose to remain on that technology rather than go to P25. So it would be impossible for you to piggyback onto their system, but you can, of course, use their system because our radios will support both.
Well, help me understand what that means. We can use their system, but we can't piggyback it.
We can use it for, using our mobiles and portables, but the actual infrastructure is EDAX infrastructure, which is a proprietary technology that we developed back in 1986. We no longer manufacture that anymore. That's, I hate to say it's old technology because it's very functional and they're still using it every single day, but they've decided to stay with that rather than go to P25.
And if I may, essentially what Anne Marie is saying is that we couldn't build infrastructure in this town. Hartford system probably wouldn't cover us throughout the whole town, so we would be unable to go ahead and build on it. And it's essentially the same situation we're in with our existing system. The infrastructure isn't made anymore, so for example, we couldn't build a 3rd site. So, but because Harris will work with them instead, Hartford can keep their system up and running, and they can put that technology in our new radios.
While you're still up there, Ray, have we looked at, if I'm understanding what some of this feature that we're discussing about this shared capacity, this reference to New London and Waterford, not to dwell on it, but have we looked at other towns that are in similar situations and talked about whether we have that capacity to do that now before we spend the full amount on just our town?
Well, we have had an initial conversation at a mid-state meeting, and people aren't ready to go forward yet. So I think that they know that they can add on to it, and we would still have to build our infrastructure. We would, no matter what. For example, New London was able to go on Waterford system because of the way that they've built their towers. They've got coverage in New London. It's not likely based on our topography, and again, I'm not an engineer, but it's not likely, for example, we would hit the far outreaches of Rocky Hill or Newington, for example, without them building towers. So we still have to build everything that we have, and it'll work for us.
Or somebody else would build it and we would piggy on it with them.
Potentially.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm struggling with this a little bit. I mean, I certainly not talking about the merits of the importance of the system and the importance of having communication, the safety issues. I think David and I talked about this weekend when I ran into him. He was saying, you have one incident and everybody's going to be saying, why do you need to do the system? I completely appreciate that. But I also think we're laying out here in this presentation some features that we're talking about or selling as part of it. And now as we ask the question, it's like, well, we can't do that. And interoperability with Hartford really doesn't apply, and then these 2 towns happen to have situations, so we're saying that one of the features is that we could add surrounding communities, but we haven't fully explored that, and you're saying it may not even be possible. So, I'm going to be a little bit harder about this because I think 10 years ago when we did this, and I wasn't here at the time, but I don't know that people asked those hard questions. And I think our residents are going to raise an eyebrow, as I am, about $3.5 million for us to communicate with features that I'm not convinced necessarily, take all the bells and whistles aside from it. I'd like to understand it better and, you know, maybe dumb it down because I'm not a technology guy. But I wanted to ask another question about, I think you said something about you're leasing the fiber links?
I'm sorry?
You said something about leasing the fiber links?
We are actually leasing all of our fiber links. You, actually, Town Council approved that for the radio system 2 months ago. We're trying to work with Motorola to get those installed right now, and we've been having some technical difficulties. But our entire town network, both the town connecting all buildings and our connection to the school and all of the schools, are on a leased managed fiber, and we're all with the same vendor.
Yeah, and I sort of remember, so that's compatible. We're saying
Yes.
that's compatible with this system.
Yes.
That's not included in this project
No.
cost. We're paying that separately to what was it, AT&T? Or-
Digital back office.
Okay, they've run all the fiber optics, so we're just
Yes.
saying, okay, we're gonna jump on that, and this
Yes.
system is gonna tie into it.
Yes, yes.
And that's not an issue long-term in anybody's mind.
No, no. Schools, I think, has been with digital back office for a significant number of years, and we've found their service to be very, very good, and pricing competitive. I do, if I may, want to clarify that certainly a surrounding town could get on this system. I didn't mean to imply they couldn't. What I was saying was it might not be as easy as it was for New London and Waterford. There might need to be more expense borne. And I think other towns will be interested when they're ready to replace their systems. And I think it's also important at this point to note that one of the features of our system is evident every time we have a storm, in that we can all talk to each other. What happens in our surrounding towns, and I think we've passed out a scenario, is that fire has one channel, police has another channel, and Public Works may or may not have a channel, and they have to, the conversation has to be patched between the dispatchers, so.
Yeah, no, I like that, and I think if I recall, this P25 system was an outgrowth of the September 11 difficulty, so it became a national requirement. I completely have no issues with any of that. I'm just thinking as we talk about these features and we talk about their interface with potential other communities, it just occurs to me we should be having those discussions now before we plop our $3.5 million down. But that's just my reaction. That may not be informed enough to be accurate. And just a last follow-up to something Stothy asked about the software. Under the current contract that we're proposing on this, it's 3 years?
Maintenance on the infrastructure is 2 years. Essentially, it's the year while it's being built and a year afterwards. And then on the portables and mobiles, it's 2 or 3 years, depending on the piece of equipment.
That's the hardware.
That's the user equipment.
Yeah, that's fine. Let me just go back to the software. The software is covered for 2 years.
Yes.
And after that, we can elect to have a renewed contract for any length of time. Is that what I heard? And
Yes.
I know we haven't seen the breakdown of costs, or at least I haven't. Maybe it's in a packet. but I haven't seen
The infrastructure maintenance, when it kicks in, is $112,000 annually, and it would potentially go up by 3%. And that's the infrastructure hardware as well as the software. So we could choose to do maintenance a different way. We could do a service contract a different way and just do a service. And I don't know if you know that number, Anne Marie.
Not off the top of my head, I'd have
That
to look it
that
up.
112 is annual after the 2 years. That's for hardware and software?
Yes.
And if I might, that's what we're doing now with Motorola.
Right,
And
yeah.
what's the current Motorola fee?
What's the current Motorola?
Well, the current one, because they're stopping monitoring and not covering the microwaves anymore, is for the new fiscal year is 102. It's about 100, and it was annually about $150,000. It's fluctuated because we've got new equipment with rebanding.
I had just 3 questions. One is, are we installing and configuring this for voice only at this point in time, or can it handle video as well?
It can handle data, but it can handle data, but it is being installed for voice only. And I'd like to make one comment about the bells and whistles. Really, there's little or no optional equipment in this proposal. The bells and whistles these days are really an inherent part of P25 IP-based systems. So you're really not paying extra
Yeah.
for all of the features that
Yeah,
you're getting.
I understand that. I didn't mean to suggest that you've built in bells and whistles into the system in terms of the hardware and equipment. Again, talking with police and fire, I don't think that's the case. I agree. I'm just suggesting that the references to some of the enhanced features of this that you pointed out in your presentation are question marks for me, because you're suggesting that this capacity to incorporate other communities is an important selling feature, and I'm not hearing that that's a reality. I'm hearing that it's a possibility. And that's a big difference for me, because we've talked about this shared services thing for years in our town. With this is a natural in my mind. And in fact, when we first started talking about the radio system, if I remember right, when we met back in the fall, we were talking about how some of the communities are facing the same problem. And we were, I was hoping that we would see a couple of communities get together and say, why would we spend 3.5 and you spend 3.5 and somebody else spent 3.5, and you're correct, Ray, and I'm sure you're going to tell me that we all have to build infrastructure, and regardless, I'm sure you're going to tell me that, and that's fine. But I'd like to see that if in fact we have 3 towers and 3 sections, we're going to add a section now, I guess, and Rocky Hill maybe needs 2, but maybe one of the 3 would overlap, and then there could be some interfacing, saving us some component. Those are questions I would be wanting to have answered now before we put in 3.5 ourselves. But and those may be questions you've already answered, but. Again, I'm just responding to the presentation, suggesting that that's part of this program when I think it's sort of being presented without necessarily being realistic.
Go ahead.
So to follow up on my question about if this is video or voice only, it is being configured and installed for voice only, correct? But it has video capabilities.
The Beyond system does, yes.
Would there be significant costs associated in the future if we wanted to expand this to video capabilities and have closed circuit television in schools and things like that for security purposes?
To be tied to the radio system itself?
To be leveraging on the hardware and infrastructure?
No.
It can't be upgraded for any of
The
that?
Beyond system can stream video.
Okay.
The two-way radio system cannot.
Okay. And then the other thing too is in terms of the timing, I know it'd be nice to wait for other towns, but unfortunately I believe, Rand, other towns have systems that actually work rather than ours, and they're not being pushed into a situation where they're not being supported anymore in maintenance or support, and we sort of have a time frame that we have to operate under?
That's correct. We are currently operating with microwaves that are no longer maintained or supported. We have controllers that there are no replacements if one of them breaks. So, and we also have a situation where the current vendor will stop monitoring our system. So if a microwave goes down at Callahan, for example, we won't know it because they won't be monitoring it anymore. We'll know it when the backup microwave goes down and it takes half the system and half the coverage with it. So we are in a situation where we cannot keep this existing system patched together much longer.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Councilor Roberts.
Yeah, I just, I had I think probably of everybody in the council, I had the distinction of being on the council the first time this, when the previous system was, and I'm pretty sure I voted against it, so, because I remember Chief Karen Jikas giving me an earful. So the old saying, once burned, twice shy. I'm a little hesitant about this, the wonders of this new system. I think the committee's done great work and spent a lot of time on it, but this is, it just, from personally, I have kind of concerns with when I keep hearing so many of the main components of it are proprietary to Harris. And what's the, in 5-10 years, what if we decide, Harris hasn't turned out much better than other systems and we need to go somewhere else? Does, we lose access to those systems? The words proprietary make me nervous.
Actually, the proprietary parts of the system are not part of your main radio system. It is a P25 system.
Mm-hmm.
It is an open standard. It is the standard that APCO has said is for public safety moving forward. The proprietary piece, such as the Beyond piece for smartphones, et cetera, is totally outside of the day-to-day operation of the two-way radio system. That isn't, the two-way radio system for the town is an open standard. It is P25. It is not proprietary.
Okay, so all the proprietary stuff, the Beyond, and what else did you mention? Was there-
EVAX, which is being used in Hartford, right. Those are really outside of the radio system and would not be considered part of the basic radio system for the town departments. They're nice features, they're great features, as a matter of fact, but if you didn't have it, you wouldn't impact the two-way radio system at all.
Okay, and my other concern is basically out of 169 towns, it's New London with Waterford, which I think Waterford is smaller than we are, piggybacked on, and sort of an aging system in Hartford. And I know other towns have their systems are in different cycles of their life, let's call it that. But, I'd feel better if I knew there were other systems, bigger towns or cities that are on it than these three particular ones.
Well, we've actually provided quite a few references of P25 systems that have been installed by Harris.
In Connecticut?
No, well, we have provided the Connecticut ones as well, but
Right.
no, I'm around the country in the East Coast. There are lots of systems that we've installed and maintained for the past couple of years.
Right.
Just out of
I mean, it's-
curiosity, what's unique about Connecticut?
No, I
versus
just,
New York
what's
or
unique
Jersey?
about Connecticut, that we live in Connecticut, so,
But versus New Jersey,
yeah, I know, but,
I'm just curious. Why?
when Motorola came in X number of years ago, it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I don't want to find out in a few years that we've, bought the same loaf of bread down the pike.
Oh, no, I
That's-
agree.
that's not true.
My question was just.
That's not true from what Trot said, so don't go saying that. That's not true.
What's
No,
not
so-
true?
About Motorola, we bought a bill of goods from Motorola that was a piece of junk.
Right. Right, but it was presented originally to the council as the end-all and be-all because we had to be on the 800 megahertz,
And from the
John.
last infrastructure meeting we had,
I'm not
the ma- the man
disputing
from
what
he-
Trout said.
Okay.
I'm saying, at the time, we were presented with information that this new system was what we needed to have, despite the fact that many of the surrounding towns, their public safety people did not feel they needed to go with it. We were sold this system. The system has had nothing but problems for a variety of reasons since it was installed. Whether it was the product was not good, whether it was they didn't give us what we were supposed to get, whether it was 50,000 other things. We voted as a council on what was presented to us, and it turned out that what we voted on was not what we ended up getting, and you can't dispute that.
So I apologize. I didn't mean to start this discussion here. My simple
No,
question.
you and I are fine.
Yeah, my simple question was just around why are we concerned that technology would
Because
work in
I
New York and
think-
New Jersey versus Connecticut?
Because I think in Connecticut, especially with CROG, and a lot of the public safety stuff has been done regionally, and there's a great deal of expertise in this area. And so it concerns me when we only have 2 towns in southeast Connecticut and nothing in the Hartford area.
Okay.
So, I mean, the CROG has spent tons of time. They have a public safety council. They do all sorts of technical stuff. And so, knowing that, I just want to know why we're kind of the only ones out there.
So I guess maybe relative to that, if I can just ask a question, has CROG looked into P25 or the system and declined it?
No, CROG doesn't really get involved in the acquisition of radio systems. They're traditionally done as independent. I don't know of any towns other than Waterford and New London where we have a joined radio system in Connecticut. There may be many in the Northeast, but not in Connecticut. And I want to add that I think the technology that you voted for back in whenever 2002 was the right decision. It's the right technology. I think, unfortunately, for whatever reason, and it may have been sold in good faith, I'm certain it was purchased in good faith. The technology was right. The system was not built properly. There are thousands of comparable systems across the country that worked well. Ours did not, and we've had ongoing issues that I know you're all aware of. I also want to point out that Greenwich, Connecticut, currently, and West Hartford are both in the same situation we are. They're just 6 months behind us because their systems are functioning properly, so their timing to replace isn't quite as important as ours is.
Thank you.
I have one question. And in regards to, at the infrastructure meeting, you talked about the testing of the system when it is, when it gets installed. And one of the questions that I brought up at that meeting was related to the fire department, most specifically, because of some of the coverage issues that they've had in looking at like the lower part of a building. And we did have a failure during a fire situation with the radio system where they were not able to contact each other on their portables. And you really gave a very good explanation about the testing that would go on with putting a system like this in, and how you would look at those. So if you were to keep track of those areas where you knew that there could be potential issues, that you would work to try to mitigate those. So if you could just talk a little bit about the testing, because I think that really brought a lot of those questions to light.
In-building coverage is critical, obviously, as we know, for police and firefighters. Typically, we will be testing the radio system, every building, every basement, every attic, every stairwell, although frankly, stairwells and elevator shafts and basements are usually excluded from testing. Should there be a building that there are some significant coverage issues with, there are solutions to fixing that. BDA, which is a bidirectional amplifier system, could be installed. Most of the time, and I'll refer back to Hartford because their thought process, and typically I have to agree with it, is put the system in first, do the testing. If you have a significant problem, look at a BDA system. But to initially put BDA systems in buildings that may never need them just doesn't make financial sense.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I think, but the testing piece, I think, was, it helped me allay some of the concerns because of areas that weren't covered.
Right.
Councilor Cochran, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Rayanne, if the council were to approve going this direction, say next month, when would it be operable?
It usually takes a year to a year and a half. I think Harris understands the situation we're in with our existing system and would do whatever they could to escalate it. We've talked to them about contingency plans in case we have a problem.
And are you putting together like plans for how we sort of, I guess, limp along on the existing system until then?
We are. Part of that was getting the fiber installed, and I think we have to evaluate the risk rather than maybe go through the expense of installing it with the existing vendor. So we'll look at that, but we've also talked to Eastern Communications. We have not had a lengthy conversation with Motorola yet because we don't have approval to make the change, so there's not a lot of point, but yes, a good part of John Eichner's day and Sergeant Conley's day and sometimes mine is spent making sure that this system operates and keeps going properly.
And that there's a way to keep operating it until this new system is.
Yes, we actually have, as part of the handout that I gave to the infrastructure committee, we have actually kind of a staging plan that talks about keeping our existing system operating.
Thank you.
Councilor Drake and then Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, the only thing that gives me a pretty good comfort feeling that we're going in the right direction. Number one, we've been dealing with this for 10 to 12 years, so I think we have a really better understanding of what we're doing here. There's no question about it. The second thing is, based on my understanding how it was explained to me, the original contract we have now and what we purchased was basically, we purchased a bunch of equipment and it was probably a little bit short and everybody kind of understood it was a little bit short. They thought it was going to work and it didn't work. Right. I think that was probably short-sighted. This time, we are going to buy this. It's not going to be equipment purchase spec contract. It's going to be a performance contract, and Harris has agreed to that. This contract is going to say, this is what we're going to cover, and at the end, it's going to cover this. And if you need more or less equipment, that's going to be their responsibility. So this is going to be a little bit different deal. When we buy this, it will be a performance contract, not an equipment contract. I mean, there'll be a list of equipment, but we're going to want to see performance at the end, that we get the results. So it's going to be a whole different deal than 10, 12 years ago.
Absolutely.
Deputy Mayor.
A question for Rayanne and then one for Anne Marie. Rayanne, when the fellow from Trot, didn't he mention, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he say because of, when our present system was installed, that because of budget restraints, that the town kind of cut corners on some of the communications the way we were supposed to be set up?
I think what our radio engineer from Trot said was he suspects that there was a budget number approved, what the town could spend on a radio system. So it was engineered to meet the budget number as opposed to potentially doing what we needed it to do. And, at this point, there's no way of knowing whether people thought it was going to work. I'm going to guess that because they had to put their name behind it, they thought it was going to work. Unfortunately, it didn't.
Okay. And Anne Marie, maybe you could, I know you mentioned this at our last meeting when we talked offline, but when the communication went down, I mean, with the Port Authority, and you people were there, and I can't think of a better people to talk to than the Port Authority. I mean, if the system's working there, I think it'll work fine for this town. But can you just explain to the public how long it took for communications to come back up when communications went down?
Sure. I was very actively involved in that on 9/11 before even the second tower went down. But our main piece of equipment for the Port Authority system was on Tower 1, and it went down. And when it went down, they were on a backup system that had very limited capability. We could not fly equipment in because there was no flights, no airplane traffic. We had to drive it up from Virginia, which is where we manufactured it. And we loaded a tractor trailer with technicians who programmed radios on the trip up, and we had police escorts the entire way. Every state police agency escorted us. So the towers went down at approximately 9 o'clock in the morning, and by 3 a.m. we were back up and running with a whole new site. I can't tell you which building we're on in New York because I'm under an NDA to not divulge where their infrastructure is installed, but we were back up and running at 3 a.m.
Thank you.
And that was our people in conjunction with Eastern Communications.
Thank you.
They're one of our very big customers.
Other questions? Councilor Roberts?
Yeah, it's just a comment. 9/11, I lost a family member who was a battalion chief who was in Tower 1 and was killed, obviously, in the line of duty, and his radio didn't work. And for 2 days, he was radioing headquarters asking, why can't you come find me? I'm in building 1, I'm by the elevator, and he basically bled to death after being crushed. So there's nobody, I totally understand the need for this kind of system and the need for everyone to be able to talk and everything. But I'm just, I want to make sure that the price is right and we're doing the right things in terms of getting the services we need in town, as well as protecting public safety and protecting the citizens in the town. So that's where I'm coming from. But yeah, obviously, that was one of the tragedies of 9/11 was finding out people couldn't talk to each other.
Other questions from councilors? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is public comments. We have 2 hearing items. I'll call the hearing for the first item, which is hearing on the resolution to approve the amended educational specifications to create district storage at Weathersfield High School. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this hearing topic? Any members wishing to speak on this hearing topic? Last time, any members wishing to speak on this particular hearing topic? Okay, I declare the hearing closed on 1A. 1B is hearing on an ordinance to approve the establishment of a CNEF fund for the Weathersfield Public Schools surplus. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this hearing item? Any members wishing to speak on this hearing item? Last time, any members wishing to speak on this hearing item? Okay, the hearings are closed. Moving on to general comments. Any public comments tonight? Yes, Mr. Cudmore?
Mike Cuddigan, 49 Westlake Road. I want to make a couple of comments, actually one about the presentation tonight, and more importantly, where we're going with the radio system. I'm not a radio guy, but I've been in the IT industry for 30 years plus, working in large companies on hardware, software systems. And the key that we always did was we always understood where the industry was going, so that we didn't buy something that was going to be obsolete or not work in a few years. Hardware, software, applications, everything. I think it's very important that we apply the same kind of process with this. We know we had, back in 2001, 2002, a lot of things seem to have gone wrong. It looks like the people back then, and I think it was alluded to tonight, various people that talked here, that not much thought was put into that kind of situation. This sounded very good tonight. Harris is, I think, a well-known company, I guess. But I think we need to hire an independent consultant to review all of what got said tonight. What Harris does, what it may not do, the kind of questions that got asked here tonight, and evaluate independently and come back to the town and tell us if it's 99% correct, 50% correct, 2% correct, whatever. None of us here know enough to really be able to do that. And it might cost a few dollars to do that. Perhaps, I think it was said, West Hartford and Greenwich are approaching where we are, is going to have to do something pretty soon. That's important that we spend that kind of money to know that we're going in the right direction. We can't have a repeat performance of what happened 11 years ago. That's just not going to work. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to speak? Mr. Young?
Isn't that what that guy? Great. Right there. He's a radio consultant.
Go ahead.
I've been asked to provide just a follow-up comment to Mr. Cuddigan. I've been asked to provide a quick follow-up question. We do have an independent consultant on our roster, Trot Communications. It has reviewed all this. They've been working with us for 10 years on our system, and they have reviewed all this. They were actually meeting with the town council and the infrastructure committee a week ago and reviewed the same information that you heard this evening.
Good evening, Robert Young, 20 Copper Mill Road. First, I'd like to, I noticed that you have on the agenda that you're going to be talking about awards and bids for asphalt paving and milling, and also for sealing. And Mayor, I really feel that sealing is a serious problem we have here in this town. And it boils down to the same idea with this radio system. We pay for something and we get poor service. I don't know why we have to keep going back, and now it's going to be, you're going to be talking like $50,000 to go back and do some sealing on streets. We should know exactly who those vendors were that did those streets whenever, and we should be handing them the $50,000 bill. We shouldn't have to pay it. And we should lay the law down that that going forward, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to squeeze them for the money. Right now, we're looking at an extremely high amount of money for this radio system. And I did attend that meeting, as you all know, last Monday night. And from that meeting, I heard things that were similar that I heard 10, 12 years ago when they were talking about the radio system, because I attended those meetings. I spoke at those meetings. And I saw public officials. And at that time, it was the police chief who was the main person leading the charge for that new system. And he was constantly up at the podium. He was supporting it, yet later on in the minutes, and I was reading the minutes over, where he confesses that he didn't know much about radios, and he didn't know much, he was not an expert at all, but he was right up front, pushing it. And we ended up getting that pushed down our throats. And now look where we are. We're in terrible trouble. We're not in terrible trouble. We're just in trouble. And I recall when that system came on board, we heard now and then that, oh, there was a little problem, I didn't know that you had a huge problem. How many times the police chief, the current police chief, was in the council room and up at the podium? How many times did he speak about it? I never heard him once speak about it, that he had a problem. So I really question whether this old system is really that bad. If it was put together and there's some pieces missing, what is it going to cost to bring in those other pieces and make the system work? We have, at this point, and I think I asked last Monday, how much did you owe on that system that we currently have? And the town manager said that, about 6 or 8 years worth of payments. But when we go back and look at the minutes, Mr. Manager, they were still talking about finishing up the building in 2003. That's only 10 years ago. And the radio system was being put in early 2003. So we're only 10 years into it, sir. And if it costs us $3.5 million, and it costs us $100,000 a year for maintenance, and it costs us for interest, the first year was another $140,000 just on interest at 4%, because that's what it's set at, 4%. I mean, we're paying $400 and some thousand at the very first year for a system that you weren't happy with. I don't know how soon. Shortly thereafter, it was installed. And of course, that $400,000 kept dwindling down a little bit. But we're still stuck owing approximately $2 million on this thing. And now we want to spend another $3.5 million? And the maintenance that goes with it and all the little goodies that goes with it? I just don't see it happening. As I said to the manager, you're burying us. You're burying the taxpayers with this. Go after Motorola if you have a problem. You definitely would go after a taxpayer if he didn't pay his taxes, right, Harry? They'd send the lawyers after us and squeeze us until we paid. Go after Motorola for these problems. Now, the new system. I'm sorry. The system that we currently have is junk. I agree with Jerry. I think Paul was alluding to that as well. But obviously, the due diligence on that other system was not done properly. And now I think we're going to pay a dear price for that. We're now going to pay for 2 systems and only get 1 to use. And I really think we should hold off and patch up the old system and keep it working. We don't need all those bells and whistles. If we need to spend all of that money, I don't know who's going to pay all the bills. And all those great toys that we saw tonight up on the screen for our workers, I just don't understand how they're going to learn all those applications and be able to utilize it all. Have them stick with the old system. Let's keep the old system going. Paul came up with an idea about partnering with some other communities. That might not be a bad idea, but it's not going to happen this week. It might happen next year. And if you had the old system and you keep it going, maybe they have old systems as well, right? Newington has an old system. Rocky Hill has an old system. They have a water tower down in Rocky Hill by the Veterans Hospital that they put antennas up there. That's a cheap way of putting a microwave dish up and satisfying 95 or 96% of the community. I don't see how the taxpayer can continue spending all this kind of money, Mayor. You're going to drive us all out. Matter of fact, I think Rick Perry tonight and this week that he's in Hartford, I think he's going to take a bunch of companies with him. And if that happens, there'll be more going too, because companies will see their profits will increase and we're going to lose a lot. So as you keep burying us, consider the fact you might be the last one to shut the lights off. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Other members, Mr. Rowe?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. George A. Rowe, 956 Cloverdale Circle. It sure was interesting. It sure was interesting. I jotted down some notes as they were discussed this evening, so they may not be in any real good order. They're a little bit random, but I see two kinds of problems. One is a technical problem, a really significant technical problem. Do I understand it? Probably not. I really don't. But more important, as I sit and I see the questions or the lack thereof, and I listen to the jargon, I would seriously doubt if any of you here could really address the technical aspects of what's being sold to you. That's a question. It's not an accusation, it's an observation. So, my counsel initially is be very careful. Be very, very careful. It brings to mind an article I just saw recently. I've tried to find it in the New York Times and I couldn't. It had to do with false alternatives. You know, that if you don't do this, the world is going to end. Well, the world isn't going to end. And before you make these final decisions, make sure you have explored all of the real alternatives. There's always another alternative. So don't get sucked into this is the only way to go. There may be many other ways. Think about those. Make sure you follow up on those. Some of the things, the word proprietary was about the third word I wrote down here. I had the same questions that Jerry had. Should be an area of concern. And another thing, as companies are acquired, and Harris may be here today and gone tomorrow. I don't know. I looked them up on the internet today, and as I looked through what they do, they certainly seem to have a high level of technical knowledge and skill, and I would not question that at all. But you know what came to my mind? A quote by Eisenhower. Watch out for the industrial military complex. Be very careful. They're a hell of a lot more sophisticated than anybody on this bench, so my counsel to you would be ask questions and questions and more questions. This would be another bit of counsel. As I was trying to follow all of the features, it struck me as there were a lot of features. Now, I mean, I'm not the dumbest guy in the world, but I can't even make all the features on my own cell phone work. Nor can I make all the features on my telephone work, on my computer work. And someone just raised a question. I don't know whether it was someone from the public or here. Will we have so many features that are the people that have to use this in an emergency probably won't have the skill to be able to do it? And that's something you also have to think about, is that the equipment that we have, that you haven't got 14 different kinds of radios and you push that button and this button, and after a while nobody knows what they're doing. Again, these are questions that you should be asking the proposed vendor. There may be very good answers, but what I expect of my counsel is to sit back and ask those hard questions. If you don't understand it, you say, I don't understand it. And you can use my technique and say, I'm not the dumbest guy in the block, but try again, maybe I'll catch on. But in any event, this would, again, words of counsel. A thought that came up on these antennas. I thought there was one at the places I had in mind was on the police station and on the fire station. And isn't there a big antenna on the police station? Mm-hmm. What does that do? Is that part of the system? Yes. It is part of the system also, but they didn't mention it in any of the discussion here. I don't know what it does. But anyway, just a question. Let me see. I covered those points, and I don't have too many points. Just questions more than anything else. I got a chuckle out of your question about the video. Putting up cameras in the schools, closed-circuit TV, reminded me of the Stasi. Boy, keep watch on everybody. Got a big problem in the country right now. Everybody's watching everybody. It's not a good idea. And Connecticut is unique in one respect. The economics of our state, in comparison to many throughout the country, leave a lot to be desired. And I don't believe that you can tackle this thing purely from a technical perspective without giving some thought as to what the economics are. All of you in your own homes and your own lives would like to do things. And maybe the refrigerator's broke and you'll patch it together and you'll do something, but think your way through it. The economics of this particular state have to become part of your thinking and your process. I'm sure it was all done in good faith, as Rayanne says. But good faith doesn't cut it. There's a lot of people in good faith, they're in positions where they're making decisions in good faith, but they don't either have the skill or the knowledge or whatever else to have made wise decisions. And that's not criticizing those people. But my counsel is, as you have the opportunity to be wiser based on this bad experience of many years, stop and think again and again and again. And I hear a lot of the protecting of first responders, and they are on the line a lot of times. They're frontline troops. But the only reason we're doing this, I think, is not to protect the first responders, it's to protect the citizens of the town. I didn't hear too much about that, where we fit into this whole scheme of things. So I think that's about my last comment, my last counsel. I can't even get the page unstuck here. One final thought, and this is the most important one as far as I'm concerned. $3.5 million is a lot of money. You said it, all of you have said it to some degree. You've either said it very clearly or sub rosa, so to speak. There has been a pattern in this town of spending large blocks of money with the citizens with the attitude of our government apparently being, you don't know anything about what to do, and we're not going to give you the opportunity to have a say in where we spend this money. I personally believe that a referendum is an absolute must. I truly believe that, and I would urge that you do that. And even as I've listened to Jeff, as he has described the varying paying processes, if you have a referendum and the people are with you and say, yes, I think this is a good idea, I believe the manager and our council would have the opportunity to go deal with whoever they deal with on the financing. They can either bond it, I suppose, or they can go borrow it or buy it on a lease, but the citizens would have said to you, yes, we think this is a good idea, we think this is important, and we're willing to bite the bullet. We expect you to go out and see if you can get the best price on it. And we think, I would hope that we're all smart enough to be able to scare up the talent to be able to do that. So those are my thoughts on where this thing is. Don't hurry, stop, think, and give it another very careful second look. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rue. Other members of the public wishing to speak? Yes, Mr. Seekis?
Lee Seekis, 117 Wells Road. About this radio system, it is interesting, and it is also something that's not my technology. But we get a money-back guarantee. If it's false with it, okay. As far as the referendum, I think we had a referendum on the Wilkes Farm, and that was overpriced and overspent. So referendums aren't always the answer. But double checking with the party that Tom Manager mentioned, as far as making it a good purchase, is good. But the reason I came tonight is a week and a half ago we had the open house day. The Historical Society had open houses. You paid like $30 to visit these places, and it was really pathetic in a way. It said in the paper some of the places will be revealed the day of the tour, and it also didn't say anything at all about any of them being handicap accessible. At that day, I was at the Eleanor Buck-Wolf Nature Center for the Eleanor Buck-Wolf Day. Kathy Bagley was there, and I said, hey, Kathy, does Park and Rec have anything to do with this? And she said, no, it's the Historical Society. And she said she doubts that any of them would have been accessible. Well, I would like to say, as far as accessibility, if they're charging $30 for that tour, if there are any properties on these open house days, the first Saturday in June, they should be basically just 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 that are accessible, charge $3 or $6. So more people could be included. Going back 25 years ago, I think in August, our fellow citizen, Tom Lasher, passed away. He was a big advocate for the disabled, helped push for many things, and he was, we have a plaque of him by the entrance to the town hall. And I look around recently, and I've said this over the years a couple times, when a business changes hands, especially a business with a single step, it should be made accessible. It's not a total renovation of the building that would require bathrooms and everything to be made up to code, but like the property next to the cleaners right down the street, part of the rental store, it's being renovated, or being rented soon. That still has a single step. The building further down in Sastine was now a dance costume for sale business. Another business with a single step entrance. Now, I'm not saying that they have to make everything accessible, like the bathrooms, etc. But for the sake of progress, the ADA law was passed over 20 years ago, and we still have businesses that change hands. Another one, I believe, is the Green Bean and on Main Street, on Wellsfield. I've been to that restaurant years ago, but had to sit outside. And but there's a single step there. A wheelchair can't go in. I say when a business changes hands, for right of occupancy, it should be put in our law that it be made accessible. After all, we do want progress and we do want inclusion of people, and we do want to help our businesses. And basically, those things, as well as stating things like I said, the open house thing, should be done in the future more caringly, so we can live up to what we had a good 25, 30 years ago as one of the top 10 cities in the country for the disabled, which we are far from now. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sekas. Other members of the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, move on to council reports. Are there any reports of committees? Councilor Drake?
I just wanted to mention that regarding the radio station, the infrastructure committee met last Monday to discuss basically everything we did tonight. We had all councilors, public safety officials were also invited, and they listened to the presentation from the consultant. We do have a consultant on this thing to look at the whole thing. We reviewed all the past issues, the problems we've had, and where we want to go with the new system. And again, it was pretty similar to what we reviewed tonight. When we were elected 3.5 years ago, this town council, this Rayanne has had many discussions regarding this system. This is not, again, this has been going on for a long, long time, and this has been on our list of issues to be dealt with. Again, this was purchased 10 to 12 years ago. It has never worked properly. It was bought at the end of its life cycle, and the issue, I know it was just mentioned about trying to keep this thing going. The problem we're having right now, why we're kind of bringing this forward, is that we're at the point now we can't get parts. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. So we have no choice. We have to fix this. We have to do something. This seems like the way to go. It makes all the sense. It's a lot of money. I know we've all been concerned about this is a lot of money, but I think we have to do this. This system is at the beginning of its life cycle curve. The last one we bought was at the end, so it seems like the right way to go. This will get the third location in place. We only have 2. Again, what I mentioned before, the nice thing about this is we've had 10 years of learning, I guess, not what to do and where we want to go. I think this is going to take care of it. And again, we are going to do a contract based on performance, not on equipment. So this will work. And Harris is a big company, and they will the contract. We'll get it right. We've also, Jeff's going to talk a little bit about this, about about having this on a referendum. We've had a lot of discussions over the last week about having a referendum, and I mentioned during last infrastructure that there seems to be, there's a feeling we kind of want to have one. We've talked about the legalities about it, and Jeff will talk about this more, but we've made a commitment when we got into town council 3.5 years ago. We're trying to get all these long-term things that we pay yearly for actually in the budget, so we're not falling behind, then going to borrow money to buy stuff to catch up. We have the roads caught up. We're funding those in our budget fully. We have maintenance trucks, maintenance equipment. All this is now being funded regularly. The fire trucks, I know this is talked about referendums, but we're going to put this in place where we're going to be funding these on a yearly basis. And this radio system is going to be the same thing, continue the way we're going to do it. So this is not a special allotment. It's going to be different. And I think if we did bonding all these things, we'd have a problem. So Jeff, again, is going to talk about it a little bit more. So, again, I think there's something we need to do. We still have some work to do on this. We tried to do this presentation tonight and the infrastructure committee to get people up to speed. But I think next couple of weeks or next month or so, this is going to be the direction. Hopefully, this is the direction we're going to go, because I think we're truthfully kind of stuck. This is not something that's been just in the last year or so. This has been going on a long time, and it's come to a head. So I think we're trying to go in the right direction. So
You might want to mention about the third-party trot and what they're doing as far as the communications goes, how they're involved.
Well, why don't you go ahead, John?
That's fine.
No, I was just saying we have the idea of a consultant. There's no question we are not experts here by any means on this thing, and there's no way anybody here is going to be able to spend the time and effort to become an expert in this radio system. Be honest with you, Ray Ann, I think, is an expert. We've been listening to her for 3.5 years on our past town council. She really is good at this stuff, and we have a consultant that's been on this thing since the beginning, who had been fighting the battle with us with the existing supplier. So this problem with the existing supplier is not a new problem. It's been, again, a long, long time, and this consultant's given us, they've reviewed everything. Again, this seems like this is the way the world is going. I hate to say we're going to be ahead of the curve, because when you get ahead of the curve, you're probably going to have a problem. But I think this was pretty well proven where we want to go, and I think there are other towns that looks like they're going to go the same direction we're going to go. And so I think again, I think this has been discussed. There will be more discussion, but I think this is where we got to go.
Any other council reports? Okay, moving on to council comments. Any councilors have comments? I wanted to read you, I received a letter from the mayor of Nagayo. It is Dear Jeff Bridges, town manager. It has been a year since I was selected as mayor of Nagayo town. Since then, I have been trying to improve the welfare of residents and promote the development of the town in order to make it truly the most enjoyable place to live. There are many issues Nagayo needs to solve, and I'm sure we both face similar challenges. 20 years have passed since our sister city relationship was established in 1993. I assume so many things have changed in Wethersfield during this period, even though we've not been able to visit since 1997 due to the long distance. We were really pleased to see the article on the Hartford Courant website about the letter we sent in November last year. Also, we wish to thank you again for donation from Highcrest Elementary and Long River Middle Schools in Wethersfield after the Great Eastern Japan earthquake hit. I am thinking of visiting your town around the end of this September or in October, and would be honored to meet Mayor Donahaman and yourself to talk about our future direction in order to deepen exchange between our two towns. Looking forward to hearing from you soon. Sincerely, Mayor Shinichi Yoshida. And we did forward back an email with our, my email address so that we can work on putting something together, and would look to council to assist, and probably Highcrest, since they have such a close relationship, and the teacher at Highcrest has been to Nagayo during the summer. So more to come on that, but I wanted you to be aware of that. And in regards to Open House Day, it really was a very nice day. And Lee, you bring up some very good points in regards to accessibility. And one of the open house items was the Grizzleville Chapel, and not something that people normally think of. But it was nice in a partnership with Firehouse #2 and their relationship with the chapel in the early course of their chartering. So that was a very good event for the town. Other councilors?
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say I've lived in town for 35 years and driven by the Griswold Chapel about 1.5 million times and never been in. So I was able to go in, and the mayor was there with members of her family. And it was interesting to see the old pictures in the firehouse from what Griswoldville used to look like. And I also went to the Batoff Williams house, which was open. And that was very interesting because it's so early colonial. So there's a lot of resources in town, or a lot of historical places in town we take for granted. And I would, tell people to stop in once in a while and see what's available to us. It was a very interesting day, as well as the Historical Society tour.
Any other councilors? Okay, Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. As you know, the legislature has wrapped up this session. We're in the process of getting information to you through CCM on what was passed, what was not passed, and what impacts, if any of the legislation will have on the towns. As you know, we sent you out a budget report showing the impact of municipal aid on the town's budget. Roughly, we're going to be expecting $64,000 more than we anticipated in our budget overall, so that's very positive. There was some legislation that could have had some impact, and we'll be providing some documentation on where it went and if it got passed and what impacts could be. So we'll get that to you in the next week or so. Also, as Councilmember Drake said, there was a lot of discussion about a referendum. And under what conditions does the town have a referendum? The town charter has a particular section in it that states that if there is a special appropriation of more than $200,000, then that must be submitted to the public for referendum. However, these type of expenses are not special appropriations. A special appropriation would be something that does not occur in the budget process. Both the radio system and, as a follow-on, the fire truck have been provided for in the municipal budget, so those would not be considered as special appropriations. Also, you hold a referendum if you were to issue general obligation debt. That is a function of providing the bondholders a guarantee that the town's people will provide the full faith and credit of the municipality, which means you'll pay for those bonds before you pay anything else. That's what the vote on a general obligation bond entails. That's what the community says when it holds a referendum. So when we voted for the $74 million bonds for the high school, we told those people that we'll eventually purchase those bonds. Before anything else, we will pay those bonds. That's what that means. In this particular situation, we don't intend to issue general obligation debt. We actually did an evaluation based upon the length of time that the system would be financed and the interest rates and the cost of issuance. It will actually be less expensive to issue this through the lease purchase agreement. So from a cost factor and an efficiency factor, going the way we're going would be more beneficial to the community than issuing general obligation debt. Therefore, a referendum will not be necessary. So absent those two conditions, what you're left with is an advisory question. And those aren't permitted under state statute. You cannot take the pulse of the community through a public vote. You can do surveys, you can have drop boxes and people can submit letters and stuff like that. But to have a formal public vote on an advisory question is not permitted under law. And that is something that the town attorney and I have wrestled with for the past week or so. So that's the conditions under which we're operating when we talk about a referendum. And in these situations, they're not warranted, nor are they permitted. So I'll be happy to answer any questions about that.
Thank you. That's it for you?
That's it.
Okay.
Unless you had something else you want me to say.
No.
And we're done.
Madam Town Clerk, do you have any communications?
No, we do not, except that you can finish licensing your dog through the end of June without paying a penalty.
And how many are you up to today?
Oh, about 700.
Is that more or less?
It's about 100 behind last year,
Oh.
at
Okay.
the same time.
Did we license the bear?
No, we didn't.
Are we still getting calls? Have they been
Did
cited?
we hear any calls today? I didn't hear any calls today. I didn't hear any calls.
He's moved on.
You two dog?
Okay. Next on the agenda is council action. 1A, acceptance of resignations and boards and commissions. I don't believe we have any resignations. We don't have any appointments tonight. We will at the next meeting. There were some that were received early this morning for appointments. Item 1C, the action on a resolution to approve the amended educational specifications to create district storage at Weathersfield High School. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion. Motion to pass the resolution amending the educational specifications for Weathersfield High School renovation to authorize reuse as district storage of Weathersfield High School space that was formerly used as a mechanical boiler room.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would ask that Mike Turner and the chair of the building committee are here this evening to review this item, if there are any questions.
Just in brief, the building committee voted to eliminate the geothermal system on the high school renovations. With that, the architect and the construction manager started to look at the interior of the building and the spaces and felt it would be more appropriate, since there are two boiler rooms, one under the tech ed, which is in the northwest corner of the building, the other underneath essentially the main entrance or administration area, that they be combined into a single boiler room, so that all of the equipment, the electrical, the mechanical systems, all head out of one space. What that does is that will free up the space, the boiler room underneath the administration offices. It's a room of about 1,503 square feet, and the Board of Ed has voted to amend the ed specs, the EDO 49, to call that district-wide storage. And what that will allow the town to do is get at least partial reimbursement for the renovation of that space rather than no money at all. And the chairman is here, as well as Fred Bushy, to answer.
Any
Yeah,
questions?
I think you said it well. The estimated savings, of course, which goes back into the project, is about $125,000 by doing it this way.
Any questions from counselors? Just one from Mr. Bushy. Will this eliminate the potential use of the trailers? Or a trailer?
Trailers as far as
Using the
elaborate?
storage at the high school versus,
Oh, I would hope so, yes. Yes, this space that is created was the old weight room. It's approximately 1,000 square foot storage facility that we keep dry goods in for the kitchen and the boiler room. So hopefully we can get this to wrap up all district storage into these spaces. Hopefully to get rid of totally the trailers that we do have.
okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you.
1D, the action on ordinance to approve the establishment of a CNEF fund for the Weathersfield Public Schools surplus. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion to approve an ordinance creating a reserve in the CNEF fund for the Board of Education in accordance with Section 10-24(8)A of the Connecticut General Statutes.
And a second?
Second.
Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. As was discussed during the budget process, there was a desire to find a way where at the end of the year, rather than acceleration of expenditures or through a lapse of funds back to the general fund, can we find a way to preserve dollars not expended by the Board of Education into a fund that can be used for capital items. And under the state statute, section 10-248A, that provides a mechanism where the town council can establish a fund for that very purpose and can authorize expenditures from the fund for particular purposes if requested. This ordinance creates that fund within the CNEF fund and allows us to do that.
Any questions of the town manager?
Not a
Councilor
question,
McAllister?
just a comment that, oh, were you calling on Jim?
I'm
sorry.
calling on Councilor
Go ahead.
McAllister.
Sorry,
'cause
I'm sorry.
He raised his hand.
Oh.
So my question is, this fund, the intent of it is really to provide an incentive for the Board of Ed to be fiscally conservative in their spending throughout the year, and if they have money remaining left over, that they will be able to put up to a certain amount in this fund and use it for some significant improvements the following year, or build it up year over year, and then make some significant investment in the educational system.
Correct, and I also think it provides some address to a concern that if they don't spend it, they'll lose it.
Okay, thank you. Now you can go, Southie,
Right.
but you have to
Now
raise your hand.
Councilman Newsos. Yes.
Thank
Very
you,
good.
Donna. So, yeah, that's what I was basically going to say. I think it's a responsible ordinance, and that's why we supported it and proposed it. And it not only allows the Board of Ed to benefit from being fiscally responsible, it also stops that practice of rushing to spend the unspent balance on their budget before the end of the year.
Any other council comments? Council Cocken?
So as I read this, this is limited to 1% of the, when we say the appropriation, is that what the council approves as their appropriation? Because I know there's other monies that they bring in aside from.
Yes.
So it's the 1% of the, like, we approve whatever, $53 million. So it'd be 1% of that, so the limit would be $530,000.
Correct. That's the way we're interpreting it.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Motion carries. There is no unfinished business. Number 3A, Firefighters Pension Plan, amendment to the Firefighters Pension Plan. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion to approve the amendment to the Weathersfield Volunteer Firefighters Pension Plan Trust.
And a second?
Second.
Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. As some history here, the town of Weathersfield has provided its firefighters, volunteer firefighters, with a pension plan, roughly a modified 457 plan, for some time. And each year, the town contributes X amount of dollars directly for members that have a good year, based upon the amount of points they accumulate, based upon a chart that's been adopted. And there's also a distribution of interest income on those funds. And as we have discussed in the last year or so, we have moved those funds and created a trust very similar to the regular pension trust, very similar to the OPEB trust and the CREC trust. So we've created these trusts, and as a result, this particular one has generated some discussion because it had a very good year in terms of investment gains. And that led the firefighters to ask a question that wasn't anticipated with the creation of the trust. What if we really had a good year and there was excess funds? The current document provides that there is a floor of 2% to which the town must provide to each member, 2% increase in their account value, with a maximum of 4%. But after the 4%, everything would be excess. And in some instances, and in some years, if there's a very good year for investments, that excess fund could be quite a bit, and it would not be allocated to individual accounts. And this 457 plan is somewhat unique, where the members really don't, they have individual accounts, but they're not managing the investments as you would through your own mutual fund selection and so forth. It's still in a pot, but each member has a certain allocation of the resources of the fund based upon length of service and how it's grown over time. So there was discussion at the pension committee meeting, okay, what do we do if there's a significant amount of excess funds? And rather than raise the floor and the ceiling, what we came up with to address everybody's concerns, because the town's concerns were, okay, this is still in investments. Although most of it's in fixed income, which is very stable, there is the potential for a market drop and so forth and so on. So how do we protect the fund against market fluctuations and still provide the firefighters the benefits of very good years? So having discussions with the firefighters and the pension committee, we created what was called the donut hole. Or not created, we're proposing that, where if there are excess funds over 10% of the account value, the full market value of the assets, then that percentage over the 10% can be distributed back to the individual members' accounts. So the town would still hold on to 10% to guard against market fluctuations in the fund, but the members would benefit from extremely good years. And there's a kind of formulary on the podium this evening on how that would work. So that's what we're proposing. It gets away from increasing the floor, decreasing the ceiling, or so forth and so on. It just says if you have a really good year, you get to benefit from those excess funds. The fire department wholeheartedly supports this amendment, as did the pension committee on Thursday evening.
Any questions of the town manager?
I want to thank, I talked to Jeff earlier today, but I want to thank him for putting this chart together. And this is a very different from the town pension fund, right? So pension fund, if you have extra earnings, we would put less money into it potentially, down the road. This is a much more, because these are not full-time employees, because the pension, Jeff, is limited in size and scope and potential payout.
Right.
This is managed quite a bit differently. Is that why we would do why we're doing what we're doing here? Whereas in the town, the $80 million town pension fund, if you had a great year, you just
Right,
you wouldn't increase anybody's benefits. You just enjoy the.
Right. The only exactly, and these accounts. Right now, the only contribution the town is making, the town used to contribute $60,000 a year to this program. And the goal of creating the trust was to reduce the amount of money the town had to put in and make that up with the investment gains. It used to be just in a regular bank account earning a very small percentage of interest. By moving it to the trust, we now earn the money we would have paid in. The town is still required by the document, by the pension document, to contribute $500 to every member account that has a good year. And a good year is defined in the document by how many points you get, so forth and so on. So we're contributing about $500 a year to about 70 members, which equals roughly the $35,000 we budgeted for this amount, for this program. Used to be 60. That difference, that delta, is now being made up by the investment income in the fund. So, So as Jeff said, it's kind of a different deal. There's no real arc, but there is the total value of the members' accounts, which is what we're basing the difference between the total asset value and basically what we want to keep in the account. That's the two numbers there.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Next, we're on to bids. 4A is an award of bid for paving. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion to award a bid for paving to Tilcon, Connecticut Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $166,000.
I need to back up 1 second, I'm sorry. There's a typo in the document amendment. We actually want to make that retro to the current year, 2013, rather than 2014. I apologize for that. Is that acceptable?
For the pension.
For the pension. I'm sorry, that was a typo in an earlier draft.
Just remake the motion?
Yeah.
Can you just go back and amend the motion? Sorry.
So we need to amend the motion, to make it for 2014? 13, I'm sorry, 2013.
And a second?
Second.
Any other questions? We have a motion on the floor, amended motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Do we have to redo it again now, or are we good?
we're good. Now you can go on to the award of the bid for paving.
Okay, so motion to award a bid for paving to Tilcon Connecticut Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $166,000.
And a second?
Second.
Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. This is part of the annual paving program, and I'll ask Town Engineer Mike Turner to go over the particulars. He also has an announcement about the Putnam Bridge project, right?
Yes.
That I'd ask him to go over after all the bid stuff is done.
Certainly. As the manager pointed out, this is part of the road maintenance, the CNEF account, and we use that in corporation with town aid and LoCIP funds to equal $1.2 million, which is essentially our total road budget. In this case here, we're using a state bid for paving, and has been pretty much prevalent in the past. Tilcon is the low vendor for our district for the work. We're going to be looking in the $66 to $67 a ton for asphalt price range. Right now, we're probably paying about 62 to 64 in that range. So the prices have gone up. They're still well below what they were several years ago when we were up into the $75 to $80 price range. So what we've done is we've based our budget for the fall roads that has been approved by council and the capital improvement committee based on this current bid. So,
If I might, we intend to meet with the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee to outline the next 3 programs. There's a fall, a spring, and a
yes,
fall. So we're still working on those lists.
yeah.
Any questions of Mr. Craig?
There's only 2 bidders that bid our district?
Yes.
So what do they do, like all pass around who does what
No,
district? It just seems.
it's obviously a geographical.
Jeez,
you know,
how could there only be 2 bidders?
Yeah, it's a geographical thing because you have to have an asphalt plant and be able to deliver the asphalt within a timely manner and keep it warm while it's being placed. So that's why the state does do it by DOT district when they let it out to bid.
Mike, I think during the budget discussions, we had, we set aside money for smaller streets that otherwise we'd never get to because they didn't meet your criteria. And I noticed these streets are pretty small. Are these some of the streets that we were?
That's correct. The committee recommended $200,000 of our 1.2 million be set aside for small streets in each of the year's programs. So in this case here, Ridgecrest Circle is obviously not. That's a big loop road, but Ridgecrest Place is a small road. La Cava Lane, while it's not a cul-de-sac, would be considered a small road. Hunter's Path, Acorn, and Pheasant Run are all small little cul-de-sacs that, as you said, normally would not have shown up in our period, but we're hitting those as a grouping.
Thanks.
Any other questions, Deputy Mayor?
And when do you think the list will be ready for other streets that are,
Probably within the week.
so could we have that for our next council package? Is that
Absolutely.
possible?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Manousis?
I raised my hand this time.
Saw that.
Mike, question for you on these bids. I noticed that Tilcon's in every category is basically lower, but when I look under traffic control additional per ton versus 2-lane and expressway traffic control pattern, they're significantly higher. What does that mean? What's the impact?
That's for when the DOT paves like 91, where they have to use their trucks to form traffic patterns to divert out of the lanes. We don't use those particular items. Essentially, we use Class 1 and Class 2 bituminous concrete.
I see, okay. So
Okay.
those aren't relevant for us.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. 4B is the award of bid for milling. Can I have a motion?
Motion to award a bid for pavement milling to Costello Industries, Inc. for an amount not to exceed $30,000.
And a second?
Second.
Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, I'd ask Town Engineer Mike Turner to describe this item for the council.
Again, we are piggybacking off of the state bid. In this case here, Costello Industries is the low vendor. They're currently our low vendor, and they are the low vendor in the upcoming season. Their prices have gone from about $1.41 a square yard up to $1.45 a square yard. So again, very marginal increases, but well within the budget, and that's what we were, setting when we set the $30,000 budget up. It's for those particular roads that we're planning on doing in the fall.
Any questions of Mr. Turner? Okay.
Quick one. Who keeps the millings? We get that?
It depends. If the physical services department is in need, and it's within town, they haul it for free. If not, then we get a credit back from them for a couple dollars a cubic yard. But generally, it will either go to the Tilcon or the milling company. We don't sell it to the general public or anything like that.
But so do we keep that to do pothole repairs?
No, that's more for like Meadows Road, in the roads in the meadows. We surface those. A lot of times we'll use it for base under like a parking lot, something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Used it on Jordan just to keep that going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, you take what you need and. the rest of
Exactly,
it-
yes.
Any other questions? Okay, if we have a motion on the floor, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. 4C, award of bid for crack sealing. A motion?
Motion to award the CROG bid to Anseal, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $50,000 for crack sealing, hot applied method of town roads.
And a second?
Second.
Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, I'd ask Mike Turner to describe this, but Mike, when you do this, can you talk about the role that the crack sealing plays in the overall pavement maintenance program? Because
Certainly.
just give us some feedback or some background on why we seal the streets.
Okay. In this particular case, CROG puts out a bid for the capital region for crack sealing, for both hot crack sealing and cold crack sealing. There's two different methodologies. The hot crack sealing, which is Anseal, the low vendor here, that's essentially like the hot tar that is applied with a wand, and then they spray a material called Glennzoil on top of it so it doesn't track onto the vehicles. This is an appropriate crack sealing material for lower volume roads, cul-de-sacs, your typical residential streets, Church Street type of thing. Crack sealing is probably the most cost-effective way to save our roads. What it will do is we'll add, there's two ways to go about it. One is you want to do it maybe 3 to 5 years after a road is paved, when some of the cracks start to open up, the joint, the overlaps in the center line joints, things like that, when they start to open up. If you seal those, you're going to add 5 to 7 years of life easily to the pavement. Other areas where the roads are actually starting to fail, there's different types of cracks. There's transverse cracks and longitudinal cracks. Each of those means a different thing when we're looking at the distress that's causing that, okay? One of them is temperature related, the other one might be structural related. But again, the crack sealing is the best way if the road is just teetering and starting to exhibit these things. If you hit it with the crack sealing, essentially it brings it back as though it were a 100% complete road and buys us that 5 to 7 years before you would have to mill it and pave it. So that's kind of how our overall road maintenance program is balanced, if you will, with a combination of the milling and the crack sealing.
Can I ask a question? Now, on those seams,
Yes.
and that's basically the width, as a function of the width of the breadth of the paving box.
That's correct.
Why is it so difficult to keep that seam from spreading?
Because it's a cold joint.
What's that mean?
Okay, in other words, you're laying down one lane of asphalt, you're rolling it, that's curing, okay? You then have the paver come back up and pave against that. So now you have a hot asphalt being laid up against a cold material, okay? There's always gonna be a joint. It's one of the things that has plagued the industry. One of the things that has been tried, and as a matter of fact, the DOT has just done it on Prospect Street. It's called an overlap joint, where they actually take the edge of the paver and then they taper it down to nothing so that the next joint, when it's overlaid, there's like an overlap. It's not a butt up
Right.
to each other seam. One layer actually overlaps the other. But that's typically the joint that you'll see down the center of the road. Again, it's a function of the fact that, you have 12 to 13 foot as the maximum width that the paving box can lay at one time. So they can't lay a 30-foot wide road. They have to do one lane at a time. So there will always be a joint typically in the center.
Any questions?
So, I know there was some mention with the public during public comments. Newer roads that we've paved, if they start to crack, do we have warranties with the paving companies if it's their problem or, their issue to fix this? Or what do we do once we pave a road?
Yeah, it's not a warranty issue. It's just a function of the material. We're using very good quality paving companies. Tolcon has been in the industry for 100 years, and they're doing it right. They're doing the paving as it should. It's just a matter of the material that's being used. Asphalt, it's a natural material, and again, you have a cold material and a hot material fusing up against each other.
That I understand.
When you have joints.
No, the joint I understand. I'm talking about like if a road's been repaved, say my road and street were repaved, and then 5 years down the road, there's all these, longitudinal cracks. I mean, what, do we have any recourse back to the paving companies, or that just,
it's just inherent in the product itself. Heat, expansion, contraction, the road, the joints that go across the pavement are just a function of our temperature. You're not gonna have that down in Florida, for instance.
Yeah.
So, the roads will look perfect, just because of the hot temperatures.
And just as an aside, in some areas, they put a cap on after a couple of years, but we don't have that kind of program.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilor Cocken?
Thank you. Mike, this actually may apply more to the next motion, but what we did on Goff between Prospect and Wells, is that the mulch?
That's the mulch seal. That's a cold applied.
And is that, it's sort of bumpy? Is that just a function, you can't avoid that? Or
it's a different type of process. In that case there's material that's essentially wanded into the joint, and then it's covered with an organic material. It's actually a combination of mulch and sand and stone. It's a patented process. But essentially what that does is it gets pounded down into the joint by the traffic. It's certainly messy when it goes down, but it's very effective with roads that are high volume roads, because essentially what it does, and I don't want to call it pavement magic, but essentially, if during colder temperatures things shrink, the crack opens up, it seals itself by the traffic and when the weather gets warm again.
Okay. So the way we did Goff, that's the way it's supposed. It just seems bumpier than in other roads.
Yeah, it's gonna be raised up a little bit above the road surface when it's laid down.
And that's the way it's supposed to look.
That's
it wasn't that it wasn't applied correctly. That's that area of Goff.
No,
it's
they put that. What they do is they'll fill the crack, and then essentially it's a labor intensive process where they essentially hand shovel this mulch cover material on top of it, let the pavement drive over it for a few days or so, then they'll sweep up the excess. So it will leave, a slight little bump.
Okay. We're on 4C, so the crack sealing. We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. 4D is the award of bid for mulch sealing.
Motion to award the CROG bid to Mulch Seal LLC in the amount not to exceed $50,000 for crack sealing, coal applied method of town roads.
And a second.
Second.
Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Town Engineer Mike Turner.
Yes, again, this is a process. We probably used this maybe over the last 10 years or so. It is a messy process, but it is a very effective process on these heavier volume traveled roads. You could not use this on an Acorn Way or Pheasant Run type of thing because there's just not the traffic volume to pound it in. Goff Road, Griswold Road, those Ridge Road, those type of roads are the roads that are appropriate for these. So that's why we have the two methods.
Okay, any questions?
Just a quick one, the hot process, I'm sorry, the cold process, Mike, with the messy one, does that go a lot farther for 50,000 than the hot one, I assume?
No, the hot, for the 50,000, we can do miles of road.
Which one do we get more out of?
You get more out of the hot.
Why do we use the cold?
Because it's a different process. The mulch seal, I think, lasts longer.
It's the smaller cracks, right?
Right.
Smaller cracks.
And so, all right, so then how do you identify which roads, other than obviously the high traffic has to be used on the mulch one, but how do you identify which road is more appropriate for?
We use, first of all, our road manager program,
So
which
it's
is
in
the
that- it's in that
database for the
program.
types of cracks, and then we physically go out and look at them.
It's in the computer.
It's in the computer.
It's in the computer, but then we go back, we go out and look at every road before we would make a recommendation.
Well, and as we discussed, as we put the conversation with physical services and
Yes.
different input we've gotten in the committee, we'll review it.
Okay, any other questions? We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion carries. 4E, award of bid rooftop air conditioning unit for Weathersfield Volunteer Fire Department Company 3.
Motion to award a bid to Advanced Mechanical Services LLC in the amount of $21,165 to install a rooftop heating and cooling unit at Firehouse 3.
And a second?
Second?
Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. The existing unit at Firehouse 3 is kaput. Doesn't work, can't be fixed, can't get parts. So we have bid out the replacement of that system for $21,165. There is money available to do that work.
Any questions of the Town Manager? That includes the installation?
Installation, yes. That includes installation and everything, right?
Okay.
How's the rest of the internal system inside the building? Is that in pretty decent shape?
As far as we can tell, yes, that we can connect through the ductwork and the new system into the existing building without having to destroy anything inside of the building.
Thank you.
Councilman McAllister?
Just a question, I mean, the lowest bid was obviously 21,000, the highest bid was 42. How do we know that, they're gonna give us quality product being half the price? I'm just curious if we have confidence in this vendor in particular, or?
We have used this vendor quite extensively in the past. We made sure that when we took all of the vendors on a tour, we made sure that they had apples to apples, answered all their questions, they were all given the same information, the same specification of the type of unit, and what our expectations were for installation.
Because air conditions, I don't think, change that much from 42 to 21 when you, maybe commercial's different than housing, but.
Any
Okay.
other questions?
I think they're partners with Motorola.
Yeah.
Do we choose the brand we put on, or we let the vendor choose the brand
We
based on what
chose the
they supply?
brand.
So we chose the brand, so they're all equivalent brands, just who wants to install it for less, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Okay. We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, thank you. 4F, award of bid custodial services for town buildings. A motion, please.
Motion to award the bid to custodial services to Capital Cleaning Contractors, Inc. for the lump sum amount of $83,038.
And second?
Second.
Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. I'd ask Director of Physical Services, Sally Katz, to review this item.
2 years ago, a contract was awarded for cleaning services. It was a one-year contract. The contractor was able to have a one-year extension on that contract. This year, we took a look at the RFP and what we were requiring for cleaning services for the town hall, the library, the police station, and the physical services department. We went through to make sure that, and we spoke with everyone in those departments to make sure that their services and their cleaning needs were being met. and to expand on what was required, seeing as that our buildings obviously are very public. They're used at all different times of the day and night. And when we went out to bid, Capital Cleaning, which is a well-established cleaning company in Connecticut, did come back as the second lowest bidder. However, they were able to assure us that they have the number of staff that would be able to provide a high level of cleaning. They also are able to keep up with the latest technologies in eco-friendly cleaning, as there are many people with allergies and have reactions to cleaning products, and so they try to use as eco-friendly products as possible.
And they're not the contractor now?
No, they are not.
Who's the contractor now?
Performance.
And they're not on this list?
Yeah, number three.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Under 3.
So what's let me raise my hand.
Go ahead.
So is there a particular reason why you didn't go with the low bidder? The references didn't check, or?
The lowest bidder had a very small staff available. They would have basically just barely been able to cover the buildings on a good day. And on a day when you would have multiple people out, we could not be assured from the inventory of people that they had that we would be able to get the same level of service consistently from them. And also, they did not provide us the level of information regarding references, the type of cleaning that they do, the types of products that they use, and the schedule that they would be able to maintain in the buildings as Capital did.
Okay. And the difference is about, what, 8,000, something like that?
Yes.
Any other questions? Councilor Cocken?
So if we take a look, I understand you probably want to just have one cleaner in the buildings, because I noticed that that Capital was the fourth lowest for the library, but it's not feasible to take Performance, say, just to do the library and have Capital do the rest. Maybe you could talk about that.
In this type of a situation where you're going to be dealing with multiple buildings, if you are dealing with one company, then it makes a management of personnel available. Say if there's many things going on in this building, we may be able to pull staff from other buildings if they've completed something quickly. And it allows for greater efficiencies when they can move staff around products, when we're ordering products, when we're able to put product in different buildings. If you're dealing with multiple companies, then you're dealing with multiple purchasing, and you don't have that ability to move staff in and out as needed.
I think it's more of an allocation issue than it is anything.
Mm-hmm.
Just a follow-up, it looks like the difference between the current vendor and Capital is about 5,000?
Yes.
I don't, I'm sorry, I didn't have that in front of me. Yes.
5,000, less than? I mean, I'm just wondering why we would, have we been unhappy with their performance?
We have had some issues, especially in this building, with performance and the level of service that they've given us. I've been in multiple conversations with the manager of Performance about the amount of hours and the type of services that they've been providing here. And it seemed that over the past year, we were getting more and more public complaints about the level of service, especially in this building.
No. And just to follow up to Jeff's point, I think these contractors would not hold those individual line item prices if it was just one building. I'm sure this is a package, they just kind of divided up into one number. So I bet if we went back, that number wouldn't hold up.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Move.
Before we do that, Mike Mike's got something about that. Sorry.
Council moved on to the other items rather quickly. I just wanted to let council and the public know that tomorrow evening over at Glastonbury at the Riverfront Community Center, there's a public informational meeting, I guess is what DOT calls them, on the Putnam Bridge multimodal trail connections. As you recall, the Putnam Bridge is being renovated, and part of that renovation is to add a 6-foot walkway across the bridge. What that project does not include is the way to get off the bridge and down into our bike trail system on our side and on the Glastonbury side. So Kathy Bagley and I have been attending meetings, working with the DOT staff and their consultant, and they actually have an informational meeting tomorrow to share the committee's recommended scenarios to get down from the bridge down to our bike trail, which is essentially right below us, right on Great Meadow Road. So what you see is essentially the haul road that the contractor is using, just kind of like a U-shaped loop. That's essentially what our connection will be, but it'll be paved, it'll be landscaped, it'll be, you know, dressed up, and some parking spaces will be placed somewhere in that vicinity. So certainly the council and the general public are invited. It starts at 6:30 over at Glastonbury at their community center. 7 o'clock will be a formal presentation.
Just a quick question. Am I correct, is that like a $10 million add-on to the bridge to put the bike path across? Is that
I don't know if it was 10 million. I think it was like 5 to 6.
Yeah.
But it was funded by the DOT. It's in the base product that they're doing right now. Because basically they have to build an extension, like a little wing off of the side of the bridge to do that.
We did discuss that at the Conservation Commission meeting, and one of the items that did come up was in trying to help fund some of the projects, bridge projects, that in order to get some federal dollars, they look to bike trails as a mechanism to get some of those federal dollars. So that did happen with this project, so it's helping to fund and actually, you know, access across the river, so.
That's correct. The Weathersfield side is relatively easy. The Glastonbury side, where the bridge ends, they still have another 3/4 of a mile before they get to something that's livable, you know, that's, you know. So they're talking about building stepped walls and, you know, fences and retaining walls and things like that, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 6A.
Don, can I just ask one question? Who's responsible for tying into 2 ends? Is that us side or does the state pick up that? Mike, who ties in? Who does that? I mean, they do the bridge, but do we just take up our side, Glassbury does their side? Is that the idea?
Well, yeah, the consultant that's working there will also be looking for funding options. You know, it's going to be several $1 million on the Glastonbury side, for instance, to do that. And, you know, they wouldn't just build that, you know, segment across the bridge with nowhere to go. You know, so they are also pursuing funding availability, whether it's an STP urban project or some other mechanism. They probably will ask the towns to participate in some manner, but we don't know what those final numbers are going to be. I mean, Weathersfield side, they're looking at roughly, you know, between $400,000 to $600,000 to make the connection from the bridge down to Great Meadow Road. Well, obviously, you know.
Even if we were in for the traditional 20%.
That's right.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
20%.
Yeah, bike too.
You can rent a bike.
Yeah, you can rent bikes now.
That's right, you can rent bikes. Like
Okay.
a zip car. You can rent it.
Thank you, Mike. Minutes, special meeting minutes for May 23rd, 2013. We had to put this back on the agenda because we did not have enough people who were here to vote on them. So do I have a motion for the special meeting minutes of May 23rd?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any corrections, additions, deletions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstentions, thank you.
Abstain.
Thank you. The regular meeting minutes for June 3rd.
Motion to approve?
And a second?
Second.
Any corrections, additions, deletions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstentions?
Abstain.
Abstain.
Thank you. There are
Are
3
you all set,
abstentions. Yep.
Dolores?
Yes.
Special meeting for June 10th. A motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Any corrections, additions, deletions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstentions?
Abstain.
Abstain.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes. Public comment. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak? Mr. Colantonio?
Good evening, Gas Colantonio, 16 Morrison Avenue. Just for the record, I think it's a good idea to seal these cracks. I mean, you know, it does extend the life of the pavements. But for the record, you know, I've been complaining that the driveways in the construction of the sidewalk on Morrison Avenue, the plans, if I recall correctly, they do call for a sealer, but none is there. Now it's hot, and the proposed, or the newer side driveway with the existing has an opening probably about 1/4 of an inch wide. When it gets cold, it's even wider. So with the same token, I know that I don't have as much traffic on my driveway that you have on the road, but that driveway apron, or the one that was just constructed, is not going to last as long as the one that I have. Who's going to be responsible to fix it? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colantonio. Other members of the public wishing to speak? Mr. Young?
Good evening again. Robert Young, 20 Copper Mill Road. I know there was a discussion regarding the cracks in the roads, the seam in the road. I see a lot of road that is where the seams are running. You don't even see the seam. I see a lot of the road where you don't see any crack whatsoever in the road. But then there's other pieces of the road that has seams that open up. I mean, all of us, you have no seam at all, and then you see it opening up, and then it closes up, and then it continues. You see sections where there's a lot of cracks, but no cracks at all in other sections. I believe it's all workmanship that we have a problem with. They need to run that machine in a proper way to make it so it doesn't open up that seam. Opening up that seam costs us money a few years after. And I think that is where our town is going to have to stay on the backs of these people that do this kind of work. $50,000 here, $50,000 there, every year. I mean, it all adds up, and it does have an effect. And it has an effect on what the road looks like after they get done doing it, versus if they did the job in the right fashion, you wouldn't need to do it, and the road would look good. I know there was a lot of talk about the radio system tonight. In that discussion, it appears as though you folks feel there's a tremendous need to move on this. 10 years ago, there was an equal move to move it along, and as I mentioned, the police chief at that time made a lot of statements. A lot of statements like, unfortunately, we need a new system. It is without question, time is of essence. He goes on to talk about if we're not operational by April 2003, we're out of business in the police and fire department. What he was talking about was some kind of codes or whatever that they might lose. And he was using fear tactics. And throughout a lot of that discussion, they kept talking about the issues that you need to push along. And that's what you were doing tonight, Mr. Drake. Yet, on the other hand, there were people that did come out and talk after the fact. Again, there was a lot of people that came and spoke against it. I believe you were on the council at that time, Mayor, correct? And I believe you were on there. And afterwards, several members had made comments that it seemed like at first there weren't too many people or no people that showed up. It was a secret kind of a deal. And from reading these minutes, it appears as though some council members felt that if they had known more about the system, they would have had maybe a different decision. I'm not mentioning names. You can go back and look at these minutes. They're online. And I agree that the system obviously was not a good system. Or, as Ray Ann had mentioned earlier, that the system was due to budget problems and that sort of stuff. Things were not totally done. It might not be a bad idea to go back and see what those items are that you're missing to make the system work. If 100,000, I think that's what she used as a word, 100,000 units across the country are working well, but ours is not. What are we missing? Why spend another $3.5 million? We already have $2 million approximately that we continue to owe on this system. And now you want to buy another $3.5 million system that we're going to make payments on that as well. Well, it's not like we can just throw that other one away and let the payments go with it. We still owe for it. And I would hope that you folks would understand that. But if you do understand that and you still vote for this other system, then we really have a serious problem. A serious problem in the effect that money, again, I've always said you folks don't care about money. And that just validates more of what I've said in the past. You cannot continue to spend like this. You've got to go back and look at that system that you currently have, find out what's missing, and make it work. We're already paying a lot of money. We may as well continue. Maybe the idea of teaming up with another town or two. I think Paul talked about that. Maybe Jerry talked about that. That might be the way to go, but it's not going to happen next week. I think you've got to take the bull by the horns right now and take care of what you currently have and make it work.
Mr. Young, can you summarize?
Yes. You really need to make it work. If it's not working, make it work and save the money. The economy, I don't know where it's going, and I don't know where Connecticut's going, but it doesn't look good. Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you. Other members of the public? Mr. Rue.
Good evening again, George A. Rue, 956 Cloverdale Circle. You read the explanation Jeff gave us, the differences to referendum limitations. It was interesting and it's made some kind of sense to me. I can't say that I understand it completely. And what caught my attention was when we lease vis-a-vis buy, do we start to build into our spending dollars that just never ultimately go away? Or if we bond, it seems to me if you bond, you buy the doggone thing and you reach a point where you've paid it off and hopefully you can keep the doggone thing running like the fire engine or whatever, and you save money. And then when the next fire engine comes, that's going to cost whatever it costs, and you go through that process again. With the lease arrangement, I sense, but I'm not sure, that you kind of build in forever the costs of keeping these things going all the time. And am I right or wrong in that? Or
Can I answer it? What we've tried to do over the past several years is look at the fund we pay for these types of things out of, the CNEF fund, okay? And out of that fund, we're buying trucks, police cars, fleet vehicles, so forth and so on. And where we started about 4 years ago, we had a number. We had a number of X, okay? And what we've tried to do over the past 4 years and what we're now looking to continue to do and extrapolate that further out is to say, that's the number. What can we operate with inside that number? And that's how we've tried to approach these things. Now, we fully understand, for instance, the fire truck this year. We put $200,000 in as a down payment on a fire truck. To accomplish what Dave was talking about is building these things into the operations of the town.
And I understand that makes some kind of sense.
That's as we move forward, and that's what we're trying to do. The radio system, most of the money for the radio system is already in the existing budget annually. Not as one lump sum, but as an annual cost. we were already paying $150,000 for maintenance, and we put in a little bit additional this year to cover some of these new costs. So that's already appropriated. So as we move forward, and as gradually these things get paid off, new one comes on, just like the high school, when we talk about debt, what we told the public when the high school was gonna come on is that the existing debt was gonna be paid off, and it's starting to drop quite dramatically at this point. The new debt will come on. So you'll see a spike and a drop. And that's how we're planning to fund the future of the town. As things get paid for, we maintain them, and those things that need to be replaced, we replace those. And it's a function, and it takes discipline. And that's really what we're talking about here is discipline, understanding where we are in the environment, understanding where we are in the financing cycle, understanding where we are in the life cycle of these assets, because that's really what the issue is. Where are we in the life cycle of these assets, and what resources will be available over time to replace those assets that have outlived their useful life?
And I think this makes a little bit of sense on the surface, Jeff. I guess the concern I have is that the citizenry, the voters in town, become more and more remote and have less and less say as to where our dollars are being spent. That, to me, is the fundamental concern. And let's face it, our elected officials have a reputation for well, you just had to take the recent court hearing up there in Windsor where they got nailed for robocalling and get everybody out to push the town's agenda. And these referendum are always scheduled for August when there's nobody around. And this is the kind of thinking that seems to permeate all levels of government. And I'm only talking on a local level, because I feel closer to you guys than anybody else. It's like, how do we nail these guys? How do we undercut the citizens' involvement? And I don't really think that that's a very good thing to do. If you're going to have referendum, and maybe there's some logic to what you're saying, but you ought to have it at general election time when everybody's out there. But no, if we don't do it in August, the world will end. That's a lot of baloney.
Well,
So anyway, and for example, you mentioned police cars. Police cars is one thing, but when you're talking about a $2 million fire truck, that's a very different animal.
Well, we don't buy $2 million fire.
Yeah, I know.
To show me a
you
$2
don't.
million fire truck. That'd be a nice fire truck.
I know you don't. But I really feel personally that there almost seems to be a plan to cut out citizen participation and input into where we ought to be spending our tax dollars. And because after a while, you just kind of feel kind of helpless. Regardless of what you say, do, everybody does what they want to do anyway. And that's sort of an underlying, how should I put it, an underlying concern or an underlying feeling, rightly or wrongly, perception is a reality. So anyway.
That's unfortunate because the true goal, as David had said, and this council as a whole, and what I've heard is the manager and the budget officer, is to, no surprises, know where our asset lifespans are, have a program for replacing those with minimal impact to the taxpayers, and becoming disciplined in how we manage these assets and how we're going to tax our citizens. And that's the program we've put together over the past 4 years. And in a couple more years, I mean, it's going to take some time. But once we build in those cycles, it becomes a disciplinary function to maintain those systems.
I sure hope the discipline stays because
Well,
that's
I
all you can.
understand.
Anyway, we can go in a minute. Yeah, thank you for your time, for your input. I appreciate it. Time to go home.
Any other members of the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, can I have a motion?
Before you close it, John, I just want to make one quick comment if I could. Not necessarily in response to what George just said, but first I want to say, we asked a lot of hard questions obviously tonight, and I just want to be sure it's mentioned, at least from my perspective, but I know that Ray Ann has worked tirelessly over the last few years on that topic, and I still have a lot of questions, but that's not to reflect on the hard work you've done, Ray Ann, on it. I know you've done answered a lot of questions behind the scenes as well in executive session appropriately, so I want to make sure that was mentioned publicly. And I just want to echo something Jeff just said, and that is that we have spent a couple of meetings publicly talking about the radio. I'm sure we'll talk about it again. I certainly do not think that we are making any effort to hide any of the plans to get the radio station replaced from the public. We're offering these, but we're asking hard questions today, which I think are in response to our commitment as a council to make sure we are answering those questions on behalf of our community, who probably have those very same questions, or even if they're paying attention. So I certainly do not think we're attempting to torque or twist anybody into hiding something. So I just want to correct, I don't think that's accurate. Thanks, Donna.
Thank you. Now can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions, thank you. Okay.
So bad at race back.
Chris, how are you?